So, hey guys, are you frustrated with where you're at right now? Maybe stunted in your progress? Well, if you are, I want to recommend a place for you to go called Growth Day. Growthday.com/ed. It is the #1 personal development app on the planet. It's got all kinds of high performance techniques in there, courses, accountability, journaling, live speeches from some of the top influencers in the world, including me. It's an overall environment to change your life. Growthday.com/ed. I want to go to something you said. You used the word imagination earlier, and in my book, I wrote about this. I'm just curious as to, I don't want this to be Pollyanna either, because I know you and I are both very tactical and strategic, but I want to go
Yes.
to that for a minute. So I have this theory that, I think children are happier than adults for the most part because they operate out of imagination, vision, dreams. That's their prism. And at some age, it could even be very young if you go through childhood trauma or whatever it might be. But at some age, almost all people, 99%, start to operate out of history and memory. And
Yeah.
that's sort of their filter or their pattern of their life. It's
Yeah.
history and memory. And I am asked often, how do I break that pattern? I think this all begins when you have fear. You go to history and memory, and then they're telling you what to believe. How does one begin to operate out of their imagination, imagine new skills, imagine a new life, uncover their version of their own genius? How does somebody do that, Tony? What's a skill or a strategy that you would recommend to somebody who says, I need to flip from this history and memory, these patterns I have, to creating new ones? And I think that starts in your imagination. How does
Yeah.
somebody do that?
You have to shift your physiology first. If you try to paint a compelling future, why are people depressed? One of the main reasons people are depressed is they don't have a compelling future. In other words, you can deal with any tough today if you have a compelling tomorrow. Anybody can do that. But today people think, oh my God, I can't go outside. Oh my God, all my choices are taken away. Oh my God, we're all going to die in 12 years because of an environmental crisis, which is total bullshit. But there are people that have been taught this, and there are kids today that are saying, I'm not going to have children because this is the world I'm entered into, because they have no compelling future. But if you try to paint a compelling future when a person is in a lowered energy state, it won't work. They'll just reject it, because in a lowered state, your brain goes into survival mechanisms. And the survival mechanism, you're always looking for what's wrong. What do I have to fight, or what do I have to fly from, or what do I have to freeze and hope it won't hurt us? That's the part of your brain that's 2 million years old, and it's well wired. But we don't have a saber-toothed tiger to deal with. So now we worry about what people say to us, or will we have enough money, or what somebody's going to write about you in social media, and we have a similar reaction. The way you overcome that is the way you drive your nervous system. So I'll give you an example. When I was at my worst, and I was in a place where I gained 38 pounds, and I was feeling sorry for myself, and I come home one night, literally, I ran out of gas on Pacific Coast Highway in Venice. I had a little apartment down there, and I didn't run out of gas because, I forgot to fill the tank. I literally had no money. I pulled over, locked the car, and prayed that it didn't get towed, because towed would be $50. I didn't have $50. And then I walked a couple miles home, and I lived there on Pacific Avenue, 2516 Pacific Avenue, Parton 3A. If you ever want to go by, I did recently. It's pretty funny. But anyway, I walk up the stairs as the sun's setting, and there's a note typed and stapled on my door. And I don't know if you've ever had the joy of having one of these experiences in your youth, but it basically says, you've not paid your rent. Remove yourself and your things. If you don't pay within 3 days, the sheriff will take your stuff and you will lose everything, right? So I open the door, I go into this place, and I lit a candle. And I didn't light it because I was spiritual. I lit it because I also not paid my electric bill. It's a true story. So I'm reading by candlelight my eviction notice. This is how low I'd gotten. And then if that wasn't enough, I get this banging on the door, and I got 3 locks because I haven't paid anybody, right? I'm looking through, and it's a friend I've not seen in a couple of years. And I got a beer belly on me, and I'd grown out, this shaggy little beard, and I was just in the worst shape. I open the door partially. What do you want? He's like, Tony, it's me, I let him in. He goes in my house, which is this little 400 square foot bachelor apartment. You can't even turn around. I'm cooking on a hot plate on the trash can. I'm washing my dishes in the bathtub. And so after he left, I was so humiliated. The whole thing, I was like, I got to do something. I didn't know what I was doing then, but now I understand what I did. I hit rock bottom, and it's like, who I am is more than what I'm living spiritually, mentally, emotionally, physically. So I'm old enough to have had a Walkman. I think you might have had one at one time in your life. Yep. And you got to really love your music in those days, right? Because you had one cassette in there. So I took this group called Heart, and I put on this song called Barracuda. I said, I'm going to run this beach till I spit up blood. And I did. I ran as hard as I could. And when I thought I couldn't do anymore, I ran harder. And I got to the end of it, and I had left this journal on the ground. I drew a line down the middle. I wrote everything on that list that I really hated that was in my life, which was most of my life, and then everything I was committed to changing. And I didn't have all the skills and tools I had today, but I had changed the ignition. It's like if you got the greatest computer in the world, there's not enough electricity, your screen's going to be messed up. Without that energy change, you're really not going to make the change. That's why everyone who comes to one of my seminars, it's a physical experience. You're not sitting on your ass for 12 hours. You're going 12 hours a day for 3 or 4 days. Now people are at home in 100 countries and they're going full tilt, like they're in a stadium for full time. And all of a sudden their energy changes. Well, in that place, now we can start to create this compelling future. Now we can start to and your nervous system says, I'm ready. Stanford did a study. They came to me during the pandemic. That's fascinating. They said, Tony, we had 2 people go through your Date with Destiny, a little 6-day seminar I do. And they said they're both clinically depressed and they have no symptoms of depression. We've never seen anything like it. What data you have on this? And I said, well, I have thousands and thousands, tens of thousands of testimonials. You go, no, but like scientific data. I said, that's not my focus. They said, do you mind if we did a study? And then they showed me something fascinating. 40% of the people that get treatment for depression, and by the way, depression has gone through the roof since COVID and since all those limitations. I know, suicide's gone through the roof and it's horrific, but only 40% get better through treatment of drugs and therapy, right? SSRIs, Prozac, Zoloft, all these things, right? 60% don't get an ounce better. Of the 40% that get better, on average, across the meta studies, they find they get about 50% better. They're half as depressed as they were. Now, some people get totally better, some not at all, but that's the average. I said, that's not much better than a placebo. They said, you're right. I said, well, what's the best you've ever seen? They said 2 years ago, Johns Hopkins did a study where they took people for 30 days of psilocybin, magic mushrooms, and therapy for 30 straight days. They got results that were 4 times greater than they'd ever seen in history. 53% of the people 30 days later had no symptoms. Never seen anything like it, but psilocybin's illegal. It's not really duplicatable. So they said, what if we model their study? We'll use the exact same criteria, but we'll have you with no drugs and have your people go through the seminar. We'll send people in that are clinically depressed and so forth. And so they did it. And the study the results were so profound, they sent the data out to 2 different organizations blinded to get the data back because they wanted to make sure it was accurate before they reported it. 100% of the people 30 days later after Date with Destiny had no symptoms of depression, but even better, 19% of those people had suicidal ideation. None had suicidal ideation. 11 months later, 11 months after 1 week, they changed so much. Their negative emotions had dropped 72%, their positive emotions up 51%. And now this last week, 2 weeks ago, I did another Date with Destiny, and they did a study with 750 people, the largest study of its type. But why does it work? Because we're not only helping people shift the way they perceive the world, like you don't experience life, you experience the life you focus on.
Yes.
If you're focused on things that piss you off, you have to be deleting the things you could be grateful for. If you're grateful, you're deleting things that could piss you off, right? So by changing their beliefs and values, they do this, not me. There's a huge shift, but it's also the biochemical change. So they tracked my body for 3 years and they found crazy, like, because you're an athlete, but I jump 1,000 times in an average program on one day. And I weigh 285 pounds. So every time I come down, it's 4 times your body weight. So imagine 1,000 pounds times 1,000 jumps, it's 1,000,000 pounds of pressure. So I did my bone density and they go, these are humans, this is great athletes, this is you, and everything like it. It's like I'm a gorilla from just the demand, right? If you've been running with a friend and you can't talk anymore, it's because your lactate is at 4. I'm at 18 and still speaking. Crazy. But here's the most interesting thing. They track my audience and me, and they found something really fascinating. There's a group that does studies on like Tom Brady, on the Tampa Bay Lightning that's won multiple times in the what do you call it, Stanley Cup. And they found there's a place biochemically that people who are under stress perform at the highest level. It's why they win. And they call it the championship bloodstream. And what happens is your testosterone surges, so you have this incredible drive, but your cortisol, which is the stress hormone, drops to the ground, so you think so clearly. That's why Tom Brady's down by 14 with 2 minutes left and he comes back to win, right? Well, I produce that in my body, but what's even more fascinating, if you know about mirror neurons, everybody in the seminar literally, because they did it with people around the world at home, and they mirror neurons exactly the same biochemical change. That's why a year later, the change is there. If I said, where were you on 9/11? Everybody knows, even in foreign countries, they'll remember who they were with, what they saw. But if I say, were you on 8/11? Most people don't know because information without emotion is barely remembered.
What a
So I
great
make
point.
sure those are merged, and that's why we get these lasting changes. So it's not enough to just understand what to do or paint a compelling future. There has to be a shift in your identity and the way in which you feel physically. And that's why the combination is so critical.
Okay, I'm going to tell you something I've never said out loud anywhere, and I haven't told you this. So, by the way, thank you for calling me an athlete. And the reason I say that to you is
It's true.
I purposely adopted that identity at something you did. And I was an athlete. I was a college athlete, as you know, but then I had gained weight too. And people ask me all the time, you know, because I have been through several of these winters like you have as well. I'm fit. I'm sure there's a vanity aspect to it, a wellness, a health aspect to it. But for me, it's my neurochemistry being where I want it to be so I can make choices. My imagination is open. I am in flow state. This has been the most critical thing. And for years, it was really just fitness people that were fit, not business people.
That's right.
You had an event. You don't do this anymore. You probably can in culture today, but I don't know if you remember, but I was very young. I'd gotten a little bit out of shape, and we're in Maui at one of your events. You and I didn't know each other then. And you did this thing where I've never said this before, but I want you to know this. You did this thing where you basically had the women in the room sort of ranked or lined up by their financial status. Do you remember this?
Yes, I do remember that.
The dudes, it was their fitness. And do you remember doing this?
Of course they do, because guys think they're hot when they're like in a beer belly, right?
Well, so did I.
Women can be totally beautiful and they're hard on themselves, right?
Yes, yes, but it changed my freaking life. I'm on this call with you. We're doing a podcast because of this moment. So he has the women sort of say which guys are fit. And then the fittest dudes get to walk up on the stage. Well, I'm young. I should be crushing this room at the time, right? There's a bunch of dudes in there that are in their 40s and 50s. I'm like, I don't know, mid-20s, early 20s. And I don't get picked. And then you're going to sit there as the dude and watch the ladies in the room cheer for the hot guys. And I wasn't picked. And I remember going, this is never going to happen to me again. And it wasn't just that I wasn't picked. It's like, you aren't living the things he's teaching.
Yeah.
And you need to change your physiology on a regular. Yes. This was an indication that my physiology wasn't being shifted on a regular basis.
Yeah.
That it wasn't one of my patterns to shift my physiology. I want everyone listening to this. You have to have a pattern of shifting your physiology.
That's right.
And it's in those moments your genius flows, your imagination flows. These skills and tactics start to happen. And it also, I want you to speak to this. I just want you to know that I credit that with you, with that experience 150 years ago. And,
that's awesome.
And I want everyone to know this, but I also want people to hear this. I want you to speak to this if you would. I think the other thing that you and I, with the people that we see that are higher level achievers, they're preparation freaks. You and I am prepared today. You're prepared, but they have a lower threshold of what they think they need to know in order to step into action.
That's true.
Right. And so how does one build that? Because there's a lot of people going, okay, I got to overcome my fear. I got to move my physiology. I've got to anchor the right emotional state in. But man, I'm just ill prepared. And you may be, that may be true.
Yeah.
But you think you have to be so prepared that you never move, you never take action. And now it'll be 2024 and we'll be on another call and you're going to want to get going again. So how does one build that resourceful, aggressive, whatever you want to call it, nature to go when they don't know everything?
Well, you got to first see what's preventing it. What's preventing it is everyone has the same two deepest fears. All humans. I don't care. I've dealt with the greatest athletes in the world, multi-billionaires, you know, guys in prison, you name it, kids. We all are afraid we're not enough at some point. If you feel like you're not young enough, strong enough, old enough, mature enough, funny enough, rich enough, something enough for someone who you really want to be enough for, it brings up an even deeper fear, which is if I'm not enough, I won't be loved. And love is the oxygen of the soul. You know, if a baby is not kinesthetically loved, they develop what's called failure to thrive syndrome. We are a unique species in that love is our competitive advantage. If you're born as a baby and there's no mother or father there, you're a lizard, you live. But if you're a child, you die. We need each other. We have a long dependency on each other. Some of the longest animals other than primates are like whales that are dependent for a year. But 5 years, 10 years, these years, 35 years, some people are still dependent, on their parents to make sure things work for them.
It's a great fear of mine with my kids.
But the point is that that fear that we're not enough is what's getting in the way. And you don't get over it, you get beyond it. And the way you get beyond it is you just train yourself. And as you just said, that's why in the seminars, it isn't just the content, it's putting you in a state where the content can land. And when you put yourself in that state on a regular basis, those flows happen. Now, you want daily practices as well. So, every day I've got a variety of daily practices, but one of those things, I jump in freezing cold water every day, I think but I don't do it because I like it or I want it. There's never a day I look forward to it. Right. But I don't hesitate. I don't negotiate with myself. It's both physically great because it flushes your blood and your lymph system completely. And you feel like $1 million coming out of it. Going in it is painful as hell. But it's like, I don't say in a minute when I'm ready or maybe tomorrow. It's like I say go, we go. So it's a mental training as well as it's a physical training, right? And when you do that over and over and then you say, I'm going to do this, your brain doesn't negotiate. You've trained your own mind. A lot of people have these discussions in their own head back and forth. And that's just a habit. All these things are patterns. I get up and I do my priming, which is putting myself in a state for just 10 minutes, a form of meditation, but it's a directed meditation. I think of 3 things I'm grateful for, about a minute each, and I live them. I don't remember it over there. I get on the roller coaster as it's going down and feel it. And I get associated to what I'm most grateful for, because gratitude destroys the 2 emotions that mess up your life, which are fear and anger. You can't be angry and grateful simultaneously. You can't be fearful and grateful. So I train my nervous system every day to start with that. Then I do this form of a prayer of blessing. Then I do this 3 to Thrive, which is a minute each on what I really want to make happen. But I don't think about making it happen. I see it as done and complete. And I train my brain to feel celebratory in that area. And in 10 minutes, I've changed my body. I've changed my mind. And then my third discipline is I usually text or call someone to leave a message of sincere acknowledgement, because I like to start my day to brighten somebody else's day, but I don't ever bullshit. I don't go, oh, you're cool. I'll go, listen, I saw last Thursday, in the meeting, you did this and this and this. I just thought that was so amazing. I just want to thank you for being that kind of person. And so it starts my day with momentum, physical momentum, mental momentum, relationship momentum. So there's disciplines like that. And then there's my workout, just like you, right? You have your workout that
you look great, by the way.
That pump, and I make sure in that workout I do something that's incredibly difficult, so that I'm always pushing a little bit stronger, getting a little bit better in some area. And then what that does is it creates a foundation that when winter's here, you go, give me winter, bitch, bastard. I'll rip through this shit. I don't care what it is you want to do. I'm ready. But most people, they're living their life in front of a screen. A lot of people today, they're living at home, right? Their shoulders are down. They're breathing like this. They get distracted by all the things around them. There's no energy really on a vital level. And then so what happens, there's no stimulus from being at the office for some people anymore. And so what happens is people's lives have gone down to a low level of energy. If you forgot everything else that I teach you skill-wise, financially, emotionally, business, all those tools, but all you did was constantly increase the strength and energy in your body as a resilient source, you're going to find the answers. Whether I taught them to you or somebody else, you're going to make up the answers.
Guys, this is 100. Yeah, I get to interrupt you, but I have to say this. This is true, what he's telling you. Okay. Not that you need me to second something Tony Robbins is saying, but he's right. I've lived it. He's 1,000% right. Do the things we're talking about. These will make changes for you. The other thing he added to that I must say that is brilliance is that when you are feeling helpless, get helpful, help people. He had a video out recently that you recorded about the feeding the families this year. You were so emotional. It moved me because I know how this is the richness of your life, is helping other people. It's the same in mine. And I think people think, well, once I get over the stuff I need, then I'll do these things. That's what they think. They think once I get my own stuff handled, then I'll be that person. No, you'll get that stuff handled when you're that person. Yeah. And I'm writing, I just want to say one thing about you with that morning message. The FBI did this study recently, I know you know about it, where they're talking about the releasing of hostages. Yeah. And how do you get a hostage release? And is it when someone's taken a hostage, is it the fact that you meet their demands that actually you get the hostages back? Actually, it's about the same whether you meet the demand or you don't. Believe it or not, there's a 2,000 times greater likelihood of the hostage being released if the person who took the hostages believes you understand why they did it.
That's right.
That they feel seen. And one of the things, if you want to be seen as a person, see other people. I have this thing I do, Tony. I'm writing a book about it right now. Let me tell you about you. I love doing that with friends. Let me tell you about you, but something you said, not you're awesome or you're cool or you're fun. Yeah. Something really true that they go, that is true. I did do that. I do have that. So I just want to acknowledge the brilliance of what he's sharing with all of you. And
I'll tell you a 2-second story about that. It's interesting. I remember when I was going to my 10-year high school reunion, when I was in school, I was really a driven kid, and I was not popular. I was popular with certain girls, more friend girls than anything else. I had like all the cheerleaders on my side. I became student body president, but I ran it like a real thing. I went to all the different groups and said, "What do you want to do?" And I went to the principal and I said, "I don't think this will work, but I think I can make this happen." So it taught me that if you're sincere, even if you weren't popular, that you could have the kind of impact. It was a real shaping experience for me. And so, but I remember I had some guys specifically that were older than I was that were competitive with me and were really brutal. I was 5'1". They were like, my head nose guard was 6'6", and he just would brutalize me, come and pour milk over my head. And so now my 10-year high school reunion comes up. And so I'm going to be, 28 years old. I've become pretty successful. I've got books and I'm having impact around the world. And, I've been seen all over the world. So I'm getting ready to go. And I got I don't know, I got really uncomfortable. And part of it was I realized, I don't know if I even relate to any of these people. I don't know if they'll even remember me or anything else. And I remember calling my mom, and my mom was an interesting character. And rarely did she have advice, but I was talking to her, I was driving in the car up there, and I always imagined I'd go up there in my limousine, and, I'd have the 3 women in my life that would be there, whatever that was, that was my picture as a stupid boy, right? And, I had a limousine at that point. It was funny as hell, but I didn't take it. I took the least expensive car. I drove myself. And I'm talking to my mom on the phone, and I said, she goes, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm going up my 10-year high school reunion." And she goes, "Wow." She goes, "You feel funny. There's something funny about you right now." I said, "What do you mean funny?" And she goes, "I know what it is. You were so different in high school. And you're thinking about, you're not one of them and you're going up there." She was so intuitive. And I said, "Well, I guess, yeah, I think you're right." She goes, "Honey, one seminar, you touch more lives of people than your entire high school of a couple thousand people." She goes, "Look what being different got you." Yeah. And I remember after you hung up the phone, I realized, I'm so focused on, well, how will I connect and all this bullshit, which I never would think normally, because normally I'm thinking about how to give. I'm not like, how do I receive? And so I started thinking, I was driving up there, about the people I might bump into, and some of them that actually kind of tortured me at the time. And I thought, I'm going to get fascinated by their lives. I'm not here to talk about mine or tell them how great it is. I'm not going to do that. And I remember, you go to your high school reunion, I don't know if you did this, but they have the old picture of you when you're in high school, and I had, hair down beyond my shoulders, and, and I was this little guy. And so I walk in, and I'll never forget the first guy that comes up to me. He didn't recognize who I was, and he looks, his eyes were at the level of my chest here, where my thigh, and he goes, "Tony?" He looks like this. It was the guy that used to torture me, right?
It was the guy.
"I was kind of hard on you. I was kind of rough." And I said, "You know what? I deserved that. I had a really bad mouth. I didn't have much respect." And I said, "Tell me about you." And I spent the whole night going around talking to people about them, nothing about me. And I had the best night, because it's like, if you really focus on others, you disappear. It's like, I used to have these long mission statements and change the earth and all that. Now my mission statement's really simple. How can I help? It's like every day I get phone calls from people. Somebody's got cancer. Somebody's, I've done so much in the health area. Somebody's got something in their business. Somebody knows somebody's got a challenge. It's like, how can I help? And nothing makes me more grateful. So I think people, as you grow, hopefully, you and I are at a stage of life where we can mentor people, because we've been through so much crap. Right. We've, overcome so much. And my hope is that the people that listen to you, that listen to Ed personally, I endorse Ed as a friend, because Ed lives this stuff. I mean, there's very few people that live it. It's one of the things I love you and respect you. You work out, you train, you do this stuff. You're not somebody just interviewing other people. You're somebody who lives it. And that, unfortunately, is rare. But when you find those rare people, you want to learn from them, because we all become like who we spend time with. And the good thing about a podcast is you get to spend time with somebody like Ed. I think it's fantastic.
Thank you. Well, they get to spend time with you today, which is the reason they're here. But thank you for that. You could have just stayed in your lane, so to speak, and you are the person people ask me, what do all the people on your show have in common? I was just saying this to someone last night, because they knew you and I were going to be talking. I went in this restaurant, sit down. The guy had just listened to my interview with Rob Dyrdek, and he goes, "I just love your show. I love the people."
I love Rob.
He's such a great guy. He loves you. And we were, commiserating back and forth. And he goes, "What's one of the common things?" I said, "Well, I'll tell you one of the odd things." I said, "I'm actually interviewing Tony again tomorrow." And I said, one of the things that they all have in common, because some of them are smart, some of them aren't so smart, some of them are disciplined, some of them aren't. They're athletes, entertainers, business people, people every day in their life that have changed their life. I said, most of them have been impacted by Tony Robbins one way or the other. Almost every single one of them. And so you have helped so many people. But a few years back, you decided, hey, I'm going to grow me. and you really invested a lot of yourself into, you had coached, I know Ray's been a friend and you'd coached Tudor Jones for a while, but you went to the financial space.
Yeah.
And I thought that took some guts, quite frankly, because you could have just stayed where you were known. I know in your businesses you've done things, but the public you is the stuff we've talked about so far.
Yeah.
But now, based on this winter we're in, I'm so grateful you went there on, how to protect or grow your money financially. So I think I'd mess today's podcast up if I didn't ask you that about this time as well. People wondering what you would tell them to do in terms of their finances right now. Do you have any advice for that for people?
Well, yeah, I think the biggest mistake is to pull back right now. That doesn't mean that you put all your money in the stock market. I'm not going to tell people what their asset allocation should look like. They really want to do their homework. I hope you'll read maybe Money Master the Game or Unshakable. I wrote 2 books where I interviewed 50 of the smartest people in the world, the Ray Dalias, the Carl Icahns, the Warren Buffetts, Paul Tudors. And I've coached Paul Tudor for almost 30 years. So these are the most successful people in history. That's who you want to learn from. And what I want to see is they're all different, but what were the common patterns of what they did? And even though they had different approaches, those common patterns were there. That's why those books became so successful. But I think what you have to look at today is, number one, you got to invest in yourself, just like we talked about earlier. You got to make you more skilled and more powerful and more effective so that you can command more going forward economically. So whether there's inflation or not, it doesn't affect you. And because there's going to be inflation for probably a period of time here. We're going to see a tough environment. The second thing is to keep feeding your mind and your emotions so that you don't freak out like everybody else. Then the third thing is you do have to get in the game. It's like the first thing you should do is stop being a consumer and become an owner. I mean, you and I both know that's not what most people are. If you own an Apple phone and you don't own Apple, that's a giant mistake. I'm not saying that Apple this price or that price. It's just over time, if you're a consumer, you lose. There's so many kids today that think socialism is going to be a really cool thing. And it's because they've never been to Venezuela, which I have, or I was there in the Soviet Union when it was still the Soviet Union. I was invited over during that time. I spent almost a month in the Soviet Union. It made me a capitalist because everybody's supposed to be equal, comrades. It's total bullshit. I'm on this train with all these scientists. They brought me because of the firewalk and things. They wanted to study what I was doing. And I'm watching us, every city we land in, and we get off the train, because I went literally from Moscow to Siberia and back, the entire country. And we're having on the train, all the Soviets that are with us, they're having caviar and champagne. And then we stop at every city and there's a main area where people got their milk and their bread. And it's got lines literally for almost a mile, people standing in the frigid cold so they could get a quarter of a loaf of bread and a half a quart of milk. And I was like, it made me angry to hear these bullshit stories about equality because it never works that way. What happens is there's a power structure. And so people today, kids, it's our fault because they don't participate in free enterprise. They had someone else take care of them in some cases for a certain period of time, and they've gone to school. And so they don't understand that life is calling you to find a way to add value, to do something better for people than anybody else is doing. And if you figure out how to do that, whether you work for yourself or you have your own business, you're going to prosper. But most people don't have that psychology. They're missing it. So you've got to become an owner. And then people are like, well, what do I invest in? How do I invest? Well, let me give you a clue. The stock market has been through World War I, World War II, every kind of financial crisis, the Depression, COVID, everything we can imagine. It's like Warren Buffett would say to you, you don't want to bet against American business. Over time, it's going to do well. But here's what's crazy. The average return over the last 20 years has been 8.2%. And so you're multiplying your money over a short period of time by that because of the compounding that occurs. But what most people don't know is if you just try to time the market and you were out of the market just 10 days, 10 of the best trading days in 20 years, instead of 8.4, you're at 4.2.
That's insane.
If you missed 20 days out of 20 years when that was happening, that were some of the best trading days, just missed those 20 days, you got a 2% return. If you missed 30 days, you're in the hole. Gosh. And what's crazy is 6 out of the 10 best trading days in any history are usually within a week of the worst trading days. And most people are freaked out, right? That's when the opportunity is there. So when you see things melting down, you go, well, when do I get in? Well, there's a great study that the Schwab group did. I thought it was fantastic. They did all the ways you could do this. Like, could you perfectly market time? And what would your return on $2,000 be over 20 years? And it was $87,000. What if you just got in whatever time you got the money, you put it in? it was $83,000. It's a $4,000 difference. And then what if you dollar cost average? It was 1,000 less. It was 82. So you put in the same amount of money and the market goes up and down. The only thing that lost money was not getting in the game, right? Because then cash went down. The value of the cash went down.
Wow.
And so you got to get in the game and you got to know what you're doing. And, please pick up. I donated all the money from Money Master the Game and Unshakable. It's part of how I fed people. It's not enough by itself, but it's part of how I fed so many people. So please go pick them up and it'll guide you step by step. And you'll stop being the chess piece and you'll become the chess player.
Golly.
Start to understand how the game works. But if you don't study it, then you're reacting to the environment and you're going to find yourself in a tough place. Become an owner. Don't just be a consumer.
Yeah, there's a running theme here through a lot of things Tony said today, which is just, so many people are going through their lives reacting to the media, reacting to their phone, reacting to the markets, reacting to what everybody's telling them to do instead of being a creator of their own destiny. So, hey guys, as you know, I've partnered up with my good friend Brennan Bouchard, who's created the greatest personal development system that has ever been designed called Growth Day. There's everything from journaling to accountability programs, live messages every Monday from myself and other influencers. There's an opportunity for you to get courses that would cost thousands of dollars completely for free. It's incredible. Go to growthday.com/ed and check it out.
The whole idea of well-being is that everybody should do worse than me. This is sickness. This is not well-being. This is not joy. This is not blissfulness. This is sickness that I enjoy that you are not doing well, or as well as me at least.
How do you balance that with wanting to do well? In other words, one of the things that's amazing about you, and I think it's why people like myself connect with you so deeply not equating us, but if you do research on this beautiful man, Will Smith, there's these, what I would call achievers are really, we gravitate to you. And there's a part, I'm sure you've been asked this before, that I say sometimes, well, some of those things about my desire to grow or expand have served me. Is there a place where we meet, where we understand we have to separate from outcome, that getting this house or this jet or this plane is not going to deliver me this bliss that I want? But at the same time, I guess, is it the concept of just wanting to grow that's the healthy part of it, so that we do expand in our life to some extent? You understand what I'm saying? There's this balance between letting it come to us and not seeking it at the expense of another person, but at the same time of wanting to grow and explore and contribute and even achieve more. How do you feel about that nuance where those two things meet?
Let me tell you this. This incident happened probably when I was 9, maybe max 10, I'm not sure, 9 or 10 years of age. Well, I came home, normally, well, in those days, I think still it's in practice. In school, every month they will give you a report card, which you should take it home and get your father or mother sign it. So in my house, it was fixed that my mother will not sign it because she is too gentle. She may just sign it. So my father is a person who must see it and sign it because he is critical enough to look at things. So one day I handed over my report card and went about my business. He opened it after some time and he saw my rank was 33, I was 33rd rank. So my father asked, how many children are there in your class? I said 33. Then he said, are you not ashamed? I said, I got the highest number, 33, I thought is the highest number in my mathematical calculation. The guy who gets only 1 must be a very poor guy. I got 53, all right? Tell me, would you like 1 million or 33 million? So I'm saying this whole idea, you want to be better than somebody, is a sick idea that's instituted into our education systems, into our social structures, everywhere. So about how can we do well? Yeah. See, for this you don't have to go to any scripture, guru, philosophy, nothing. You just have to observe life. Right now, there is an olive tree here, there is a apple tree there. Is olive tree thinking, can my olives be bigger than the apple? No, it is only striving very hard to be the best possible olive tree, isn't it? none of the other lives, whether from ant to elephant, is trying to be something other than who they are.
Gosh, it's
Human
so-
beings have this problem.
Yeah.
Why this problem has come is just this. See, for every other creature, nature has drawn two lines within which they live and die.
Mm.
For them in their life, 90% of their lives are fixed by nature. Maybe for individual creature, there is a 10% latitude. I'm saying these numbers off the cuff, okay? This is not like some
Right.
scientific numbers. But for a human being, only 10% is fixed, 90% is full latitude as to what they can do with themselves. Or in other words, for human beings, nature has taken away the top line. You could be anything you wish to be. Or in a way, I would say even the bottom line, because many people, many human beings make themselves worse than beasts and brutes around, because there is no beast and brute as far as I can see. Because I have been in wildlife, I have been in wild situations, I never found any animal, a tiger or a lion or an elephant or a bison, ever behaving irrationally, ever behaving in such a way, simply wanting to cause damage to somebody. I've never seen one animal like that. I've spent so much time in wildlife. So it is a very wrong analogy to say that if somebody is behaving in a terrible way, you say you're a beast, you're a brute. These are all wrong words. You say you are behaving like a man.
Right.
Because it's only human beings who are exhibiting these qualities. These qualities human beings are exhibiting simply because they're not able to handle their freedom. They are not suffering their bondage, they're suffering their freedom. If nature had put two lines for them also, like every other creature, they would be fine, they didn't have to pray, they didn't have to meditate, they didn't have to do anything, they would just live within those two lines, live, be born, grow up, reproduce, die one day. Essentially, this is all generation after generation is doing. They imagine all kinds of things, but this is all they're doing. But the human possibility is, we are not doing something very different from other animals. We're doing the same things. Only thing is, we can do it consciously. This greatly enhances the profoundness of our experience. This greatly enhances the impactfulness of our activity. We are not doing anything other than what an ant is doing. It is born just like us, it grows up, it lives, its traffic lanes are better controlled than ours, Nobody is overspeeding, nothing happening, they're all in perfect order, and they will reproduce and they'll die one day. This is all a human being also is doing. But we are imagining all kinds of things, and every one of these things we do it with great amount of fuss. Just see growing up how much fuss. Tell me one thing that human beings are seeing as not a problem. If you're a toddler, you have a diaper problem. You are a teenager, you have a hormonal problem. You are middle-aged, life is a crisis. Your old age is horrendous. Tell me one thing that human beings are not suffering. Everything, life and death, they suffer. This is simply because we evolved to a place where our experience of life is left in our hands by nature. This is the credit we have gained by evolution, millions of years of natural process through which we have arrived at this place where in evolutionary terms, we are on top of the world. But human beings are not feeling top of the world because they're not experiencing life. They're only experiencing their own thoughts, emotions, ideas, prejudices, philosophies and belief systems, which they think is reality. No, these are things you make up in your head. You make up these things and you believe this is reality. When you think make-believe is real, if you don't suffer, how? You must suffer. You will suffer. If you think the mirror is actually a doorway, will you walk into it or not and knock your head? That's all that's happening.
We don't have to believe our own thoughts, do we?
Oh, you made it up. You should know that you made it up. Make it up in a way that it works.
You said, my gosh, I almost feel like you live with me.
Let me tell you a joke. Can I tell you a joke, Ed?
Please, please.
It happened on a certain day, a lady went to sleep. In her sleep, she saw a hunk of a man like you, and he was just staring at her. Then he started coming closer, closer and closer. He came so close, she could even feel his breath. And she trembled, not in fear. And then she asked, "What will you do to me?" The man said, "Well, lady, it's your dream." What? What's happening in your head is your dream.
That's awesome. Oh my goodness.
See, what's happening in your head is your dream. Right now, people's problem is not that life is not happening the way they want it. Even their dream is not happening the way they want it. That's their problem.
And part of that dream, oh my gosh, it's almost like, by the way, you knew what I wanted to ask you next too, because we've talked about this thing that, well, I want to get these things for bliss. The other, I feel like, epidemic, I know you know this, is I need this other person to feel peace or bliss. There's this feeling that I'm missing a person in my life, that if I had this relationship, if this other person loved me this much, if I could share this experience with this other person, I'm going to delay my bliss until that happens. So it's not always just stuff. Wouldn't you agree? It's also this, I know we need one another. I know there's energy between humans, but there's also sometimes an unhealthy, false belief that you need another person before you can have permission for these beautiful emotions. True?
See, first of all, you must look at this carefully, because essentially what people are saying by making these statements is that creation has made a mistake. Is this life a complete life or is this half a life? You make up your mind. If this is a complete life, it should be fine by itself, and then it will interact with many things out of its joy. Now, this is what I said in the very beginning, is your life in pursuit of happiness or is your life an expression of your joy? That's the thing. As long as there is fear of suffering in you, you will never walk full stride in your life. Always, what is it that holds back people? What will happen to me? What will happen to me means what? Will I suffer? Will I die? These are the only two things, right? What else is there? What will happen to me? What will happen to me means simply this, will I suffer, will I die? This is all there is. There is no other thing that you fear, your suffering and your death. So right now, if you make yourself in such a way, no matter what happens, this is how I am. I am blissful by my own nature. Wherever you send me, this is how I am. Once it's like this, now there is no fear of suffering. Once there is no fear of suffering, you will walk full stride for the first time in your life.
Gosh, that's so awesome. And as I walk that full stride, I'm talking to myself, whispering, by the way, just so you know.
No, you're trying to motivate yourself, inspire yourself. No, you need to liberate yourself.
Do you, in that liberation, it's interesting. Have you come to a conclusion as to why we are here? So I think this great answer of life is that there's this, the contemplation of death helps us realize that is an inevitability. Has anyone ever asked you that before? Like, why are we here?
You're essentially asking why life.
Yes, yes.
See, such a question comes to you only in some way when life has become burdensome. Everything may be good. Good will become terribly burdensome after some time. All the good things in life will become very burdensome over a period of time. When life becomes burdensome, you ask this question, why life? See, the moment you ask why, I have to tell you a story. Okay? Shall I?
Please.
One day, God had nothing to do. He was playing marbles. One marble shot up like this and became planet Earth. And then, shall I continue?
Yes, please.
This is a ridiculous story. Of course, the moment I say it, you will reject it, but I could tell you a more elaborate, believable story. That is what the danger is. When I tell you a stupid story, you can easily reject it. If I tell you a more complex story that is believable, that's when the danger happens. That you move from reality to belief systems. That your belief, what you do in your head, becomes more real than the creation itself. The moment what is happening in your mind becomes more real than the creation, this is called madness. This may go off in many other names. This may go off as society, this may go off as a football club, this may go off as religion, this may go off as philosophy, but essentially it is madness because you have made your psychological reality larger than the creation itself. This is madness. This madness may be selling well in the world right now.
This is why change is so difficult for people, which to me, right now, we are now going to the brilliance of your work. Because the process of changing the habit is that, as you guys just want to make sure everyone's with us, that what Charles is saying is there's a cue, then you have a routine to get a reward. So how do you create this new habit? What's brilliant is he's leveraging how your brain already is wired to work. And so what do we change? Do we change the cue? I know the answer, but do we change the cue to create a new habit? Do we change the routine? Do we change the reward? Do we keep 2 of the 3? Do we keep 1 of the 3? How do we create a new habit?
So this is known as the golden rule of habit.
Yes,
right?
So good.
And what it says is, look, at first you can use willpower, right? You could white knuckle your way past eating that lemon bar. You could white knuckle your way to going to the gym in the morning. And sometimes you have to.
Yep.
But inevitably what happens is there's a setback, right? Your mother-in-law comes into town and you're really stressed out, and so you go eat like a whole plate of lemon bars, or you're just tired and you wake up and you don't feel like working out, and so your willpower is weak, because willpower is like a muscle. It gets tired, it gets weakened, and you stop doing it. So what's the right way to create the habit? Because the habit lets us do things without having to use willpower. Well, the key is, first of all, you have to diagnose the cue and the reward, right? So let's take your lemon bar. Or let's take a more serious habit. What other habits do you have that you've tried to change?
Smoking cigars.
Okay. So what's the cue when you start feeling that craving to smoke a cigar? What's the cue, do you think?
Well, one, there's a visual cue. When I see them or anybody around me is smoking them, I think is one. And I think stress. I think that when stress hits me, the cue for me is, for some reason, if I touch that cigar and I put it in my mouth, I'm in chill out mode with my dudes. Even though the dudes may not even be there anymore, but some of the happiest times of my life have been when that cigar's in my hand or my mouth with my buddies on a golf course or just sitting around talking smack. So stress causes me to want to chill and relax. I think the cue is stress most of the time.
And the reward, you think, is that you sort of feel that relaxation. It's like, this is a signal to yourself, like, now it's time to put work away.
Yes.
Now I can relax. Now I can stop obsessing about the thing that's making me stressed.
Well, Charles, you just said something that's so profound. I got to be honest with you. I've been smoking more and more cigars lately as I've been working more and more. It's almost my one cue to break my work cycle. Wow. I didn't even think about it until you just said it.
Okay. So let's figure out, how do we change this habit, right? Because you know the cue and you know the reward. Now, what we want to find is, we want to find a new behavior, a new routine that corresponds to that old cue and that delivers something similar to that old reward. So the cue, I think, doesn't have to change, right? You still need a break from work. Like, you still need to get to the end of the day and say, okay, finished. Like, now I'm going to put it away. So let's keep the same cue. And the reward we want is something that makes you feel like you have permission to relax. What else in your life do you do that gives you permission, gives you just a sense of sitting there and saying, like, all right, like, this is the time when I kick up my heels and I feel okay?
We're cheating on this a little bit because I have been working on it based on the foundation of your work on this one thing. But I will tell you, the other time that I find myself in non-work chill mode is when I drink coffee. I know that sounds odd, but I consider coffee still to be healthy for me, the way that I drink it. So for me, the other time I'm like unplugged is usually in the morning, or believe it or not, I'll even drink coffee in the afternoon, is when I unplug and relax. So I have been using the same cue with the same reward, but the routine has been having a cup of coffee. For some reason, that just puts me in peaceful state. Disconnects me. And so I've been using coffee as that replaced routine, keeping the cue and the reward the same.
You know what else I'm going to do it? And oftentimes cues are pretty easy to figure out, right? Rewards can be tricky. So sometimes we need to run these experiments, because like a reward could be like one of 10 things. We got to figure out which one it is. My guess is that for you, not only does that cigar bring up the memory of kind of like good friends, relaxation, but because coffee is doing something similar, my guess is, and this is pretty typical, is that part of the reward there is stimulation, like literally like biochemical stimulation.
I think in both
right?
cases,
That
that's
coffee,
true.
it gives you a burst of energy, makes you feel good. That cigar, nicotine, we know does the exact same thing. It gives us a burst of energy, makes it, that's why people smoked for years, right? Because they actually liked it. And so my guess is that now it sounds like coffee is a great replacement habit for you. It's providing the same thing. But let's say we're now at like 6 or 7 in the evening, you're getting home from work, you can't have a cup of coffee. Now the question is like, could you use decaf? Or maybe it's like all you need is like an Oreo cookie. Like not enough sugar to throw off your diet, right? Maybe it's not going to like totally mess up unless you're going hardcore keto. It's not going to totally mess up what's going on, but maybe that small bit of sugar is just enough to give you the stimulation that a cigar and coffee was providing.
Really good.
And the question is, you just test it. You try, today when you get home at 7 and you're craving a cigar and it's too late for coffee, you try a cup of decaf. Tomorrow you try a cookie, and you just sort of run through these hypotheses until you figure out the thing. And there's going to be something that your brain's going to say, oh, you know what? It's just as good. It's the old cue and the old reward. I don't mind having a cookie instead of a cigar.
Okay, I got to tell everybody, Charles and I have never talked about this. Okay, so we didn't even know we were going to talk about this today, and I'm going to tell you how this has grown into such a habit that served me. Like, bro, you're brilliant. I love brilliant people. So what I did is I like the taste of coffee. Like I like coffee ice cream. I like coffee anything. And so I did do this. Number one, I either go with a decaf with protein coffee flavored powder in my coffee.
Oh,
but here's the other thing. This is like where it's just like completely flipped into a positive habit. I drink a coffee shake about 7:30 every single night. That's a protein shake. That's delicious to me. So I literally went from moving this thing from it's not that I don't have a cigar anymore. I do have a cigar when I smoke on the golf course or something like that. But I've distilled it. Sometimes habits aren't eliminating something. It's reducing the frequency of something, right?
Absolutely. Just having control over it.
And I've gone all the way so that the cup of coffee earlier in the day and the coffee shake, which is a protein shake, and I got to get my protein in because I do lift weights at that time. And it's exactly Charles's formula, though. The cue is the same, which is sort of a stressful thing or trying to get out of work. I've replaced that cigar to went to coffee to went to a protein shake now, and it gives me the same reward. Euphoria, I get the sugar high, everything that you've said from my protein shake. That's just so brilliant. And go ahead.
What I love about this is that you're exactly right. Being in control of your habits doesn't mean you have to give up cigars. It just means you decide when to have a cigar, right? Rather than letting it happen to you. And because you now understand your own habits, because you understand the habit loop inside your own head, you can change anything. Like sometimes people ask me, so what's the difference between a good habit and a bad habit? Should the strategies differ? And the answer is your brain doesn't distinguish between good habits and bad habits. Your brain just says habits. You decide which one is a good one or a bad one. Your brain just wants to automate everything it can. And so there are often times when a cigar is not a bad habit. When you're on the golf course, when you want a cigar and it's time for a cigar and you're not doing it too much. And then there's other times when it just feels like it's controlling you instead of you making the choice yourself. And that's what this gives you. It gives all of us these tools to say, this is something I want to keep in my life, but I want to tone it down. This is something I want to bring into my life. I want to start exercising and I haven't. How do I figure it out? Okay, I need to find a cue and a reward for that exercise. It gives us control. And that's what's so deeply meaningful, right? Is to have control.
There's no exaggeration that it changes your life because you really are your habits. So if I'm a person listening to this, this is so good. If I'm a person listening to this, you say, how do I identify a cue? Like, here's all I know. I know that I find myself getting down, or I find myself not wanting to get up and go to work, or I know that's not a habit that serves me, or whatever it might be. I concluded I'm going to be better with my children and be more loving, and I find myself saying something I regret to them on a regular basis. How do we identify? Because it could be a room, it could be a sound. How do you start to look at your habit and go, what is the cue here? Like the application that's not what would you say to that?
It's a great question. So there's a really easy method for this because like I said, cues are pretty easy. So first of all, identify what the behavior is that you want to shift, right? So like saying be better with my kids. That's not really a habit, but when my kids, sometimes I snap at my kids.
Right.
Okay. So I know exactly what the behavior is. I want to stop snapping at my kids. Okay. So take an index card, and for the next 3 or 4 days, every time you feel the instinct to snap at your kids, every single time it either happens or you just feel like you're going to, write down 5 things. You're going to write down, because all cues fall into these 5 categories for 95% of the time. a certain time of day, a particular place, a certain emotion, the presence of certain other people, or a preceding behavior that has become ritualized. So you're at dinner, one of your kids is like screwing around, they won't sit down. You just write down those 5 things. Okay, so now the next morning, you have that same instinct. Now suddenly you want to snap at the kids again, and you write down those 5 things. And you start to notice, whenever I want to snap at my kids, it's because I'm feeling, even before the kid does something, I'm feeling annoyed. Like I'm either rushed and I'm stressed, or I'm having a tough conversation with my wife about like money stuff. I start to notice, okay, the cue seems to be I'm in a particular emotional place whenever I want to snap at my kid. And when I'm not in that emotional place, even if they're screwing around at the dinner table or doing whatever normally drives me crazy, if I'm calm and relaxed, I don't feel any need to snap at my kid. So now we know what the cue is. The cue for that is a particular particular emotion.
Very good.
And it might be, you mentioned that at 7:30 you have that protein drink. So for you, the protein drink might be a certain time of day. It might be that other people, whenever I get around Jim, like for some reason, I get really like worked up. I get really anxious. So your cue is Jim. Now, that doesn't mean that you're going to eradicate that cue from your life. You still got to be in meetings with Jim. You still got to you're still going to be annoyed sometimes at the dinner table. You're still going to be talking about tough things with your wife. But now you know what the cue is. And now part of you is a little bit on guard to say, normally, when I'm around this cue, I snap at my children. And probably the reward is that it gives me a sense of control. Right? I'm feeling like overwhelmed. I'm feeling like I'm talking about money and it stresses me out. I'm feeling out of control. And I snap at my kid and now I feel in control. So now the question becomes, what else can give you that same feeling of control? So when you're feeling annoyed, when you're feeling weak, when you're feeling stressed, and you know that you're likely to snap at someone because you want to feel in control, because that's the reward it delivers, what other behavior gives you that same feeling? And it might be something as simple as just saying, hey, you know what? I'm feeling annoyed right now. Jimmy, I see us like crawling out of his chair and driving me nuts. Let's all just take a break. We're just going to control our breathing for 30 seconds.
Really good. Really.
Right? And then suddenly you feel in control. You remind yourself you're in control.
Very good.
And you've substituted that old habit with a new one.
So I'm asking you hard stuff because this is really good. I think it's this awareness level. It's investing the time and trying to uncover what you said, that index card strategy. Okay, what preceded this? Multiple times. Because that is truly what your cue is on a negative habit.
Well, and the thing is that, remember that in that experiment, the rat's brains sort of turned off as they're running through the maze, right? This is why habits are so powerful, is because our brain turns off in the grip of a habit. So things that could be obvious to our spouse, things that could be obvious if we were paying attention, they're not obvious to us because our brain's turned off. That's what it's supposed to do in the grip of a habit.
And that's sometimes why, if it's a regrettable habit, and not all habits are, that you later go, what was I thinking? You weren't thinking.
That's exactly right.
You were not thinking. You were in habit mode.
That's 100%.
So I'm golfing yesterday. I'm telling these guys, I'm interviewing this dude tomorrow that I wanted to talk to for a long time, because the book made a massive, my work, I already talk a lot when I work with people, like with athletes and stuff, on creating triggers. We create them. Create a trigger to put you into a state, right? And then there's a reward. So I didn't have your terminology, but I've used triggers and stuff like that for many, many years with getting people to get into a peak state. So I'm telling these guys about you. And I said, anything you want me to ask them? And I never ask other people's questions on the show, but this question was so good from one of the dudes that I thought it was good. This is a person who owns a very prominent gym, like a lot of them, lot, one of the top gyms on the planet. He goes, look, a lot of people that come to our gym want to work out right when they wake up, but they have a hard time creating the habit of waking up and finding themselves working out prior to work every day. They feel like they'd get a better workout in the morning, but they just don't seem to get their mojo going in the morning. And I said, it's interesting because he has this thing that says, you have a cue or trigger, and then you have the routine you wish for, and then there's a reward. I said, I wonder if you could I don't know the answer, so I'm going to ask you, could the alarm going off become the cue that puts you into the routine of getting up, getting dressed, going to the gym? So the answer is, could the cue be something that simple? And then lastly, how do you create a reward for something like working out?
So it's okay, so let me ask you. So do you work out every day?
I work out about 5 days a week.
Okay.
I work out 5 days a week.
And do you do it in the morning, evenings? Tell me about your
I do it in the morning.
Okay.
Yeah.
And for you, you do it right after you wake up?
Pretty close to it, within 30 minutes.
And have you got, when you wake up, that alarm goes off,
Mhm.
are your workout clothes? You know exactly where they are?
I
You
have
got to search
my
for 'em?
workout clothes are done. I'm in habit. I think that probably the reason I'm asking it this way is that my alarm is the cue.
Okay.
That puts me, I
Okay.
think it is. It could be putting the workout clothes on, but I have a sequence of things that I've done repeatedly that trigger this routine.
And that's great, because like you don't need just one. Like, it's fine if you're trying to create this exercise habit. It's fine to create 7 cues, right? Put your running shoes next to the bed so you see them. Lay out your workout clothes, so all you got to do is slip them on, right? All of that stuff. Now, here's my question for you: when you first started working out, what was the reward? Because when you first started, it sucks, right? Exercise is terrible before you're good
That's
at
the
it.
part where I was challenging myself about the formula. To be honest with you, I don't recall the reward, other than I do recall, because I didn't like working out. I didn't like getting sore. I didn't like sweating. I didn't see immediate results. So what was the reward? I was thinking to myself, I can only conclude that I felt good about myself, that I was doing something I had never done before. I remember consciously driving back early. This was like 30 years ago, but I drove to the gym back in those days. I do recall pretty early, like one of the first few workouts I did, going, well, most people wouldn't do this, man. Good job. I remember telling myself that, like, you're doing something most people wouldn't be willing to do right now. And I think that was probably a form of reward, was pride.
Yes,
Pleasure.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I'm sure that's it. I mean, what's interesting is you could have told yourself something else. You could have said like, okay, so like, thank goodness I got it done. Or, me and like every other person I saw in the gym with me this morning, there's like literally tens of thousands of people who are working at the gym at the same time I am. Or you could have just said like, okay, check it off, got that done. But instead, what you did is you gave yourself a reward. You consciously decided to reward yourself. Now, my guess is, and you probably weren't even aware of this, if we were to go back, like time travel, watch you, my guess is also you did a couple other things. You probably also, without even realizing it, you might have let yourself eat a little bit better that day, right? Maybe have a smoothie after that workout because you think you deserve it. Take a little bit of a longer shower, right? Like, let yourself really like kind of feel those endorphins. You were giving yourself rewards, both consciously and unconsciously, to make that exercise powerful. Now, compare that to how so many people start to exercise. You say, tomorrow I'm going to go for a run, and you wake up and you start looking for your workout clothes, and you're thinking the whole time, like, I'm going to look like an idiot. I don't even know like where to run. Like, I'm going to look like I don't have the right clothes. You finally get the clothes on. You go, you run for a little bit. You said like, I'm going to do a mile. You end up doing half a mile, and you're like winded, and you like come home, and now you're running late. So you like jump in the shower as fast as you can. You like speed the kids to school, and you're like, get out of the car, get out of the car. Yeah. You like rush to your office, and now for the first time you can like sit down at your desk and catch your breath, and like you feel the sweat on your body, and you realize you're like 10 minutes late to like the meeting. Most people punish themselves for exercising as they plan for the exercise. They don't plan for what happens after the exercise. They don't plan for that reward. You got in the habit of giving yourself a reward when you exercise. And part of it was deliberate and part of it was unconscious, but you gave yourself the space to have those rewards. And unless you do that, if you were super stressed, if you were rushing home from the gym that day because you got to get to some meeting and you hadn't planned for it, you wouldn't have thought, man, I did great today. I did the thing that nobody else is doing. You would have thought, God, I got to get home as fast as I can. You got to create that space for the reward in your life.
Oh, everyone, you need to go back and listen to that again. That's it. That's the thing. That's the thing that causes people, I think, to not make this a habit. It's like, they don't plan this. Wow, that's so good. Plan the space for the reward in anything you want to create for yourself. I was kind of controversial early on in personal development, where everyone's grind. I said, hey, look, I outwork everybody, but you have to give room for the reward to yourself, for the celebration, or eventually your brain concludes, I don't want to do this. I'm getting no dopamine. I'm getting nothing out of this.
So let me ask you now that you exercise 5 times a week, it's like completely ingrained. What's the reward for you now? Like, what do you feel or do after that workout?
Well, it's funny you said the shower thing. One of my favorite things in the world is how good I feel in the shower after I train, and that just sort of reflection of myself that. And now there's a pride thing where like, I've been doing this for 30 years. I think there's a reward. I get multiple rewards. I get someone, people telling you that you look great. That's a form of a reward. I'm not giving it to myself, but it is a reward. It's someone saying, hey, what are you asking me for advice on how to work out over the years, you know, at the gym eventually. There ended up being these stacks of rewards. I'd say the reward now is I feel physically strong. I remind myself that I'm physically strong. It's certainly being physical's now become even past a habit to part of my identity. I feel like it's a part of my identity. It's been so ingrained into me that in the absence of it, I don't feel like myself anymore. So that it's become that deeply ingrained. But it's funny because I didn't know your work, but I've always been pretty good at going, hey man, this is great what you're doing, like consciously doing it. I give myself other rewards though, what you said earlier. Even the lemon bar thing, to be candid with you, I give myself permission to eat a certain way sometimes. And it's one of the rewards of having trained very hard is, hey man, I've burned a bunch of calories already. I've done this, this, and this. I deserve the damn lemon bar.
Yeah.
Right.
And that doesn't mean it's going to be a daily thing, right? Like I don't deserve lemon bar every single day, but when I feel that craving, it's okay to give into it. I'm making a reward for myself because I know that like this lemon bar, like this is not going to impact me. This one lemon bar, I've banked away the self-discipline to allow myself this.
Yes.
And that's a form of reward. And that's really powerful. And yet, you know, I'm sure you see this all the time in your practice. America is a stoic nation. We are a nation that tries to bully ourselves into productivity, into success, into accomplishment. And the truth of the matter is, some of that is good, right? Yep. It's a great nation because we are so disciplined and then we have so much willpower. But the way that you leverage that, the way that you take advantage of that, is you give yourself time to enjoy the spoils of it.
Yeah, and the truth is, what you're saying, this is what I want to get everybody to hear. You're doing this anyway. You're already rewarding yourself possibly for routines that don't serve you. So this is something you're going to do. So you might as well acknowledge it. What's great about what you're doing is you're leveraging the brain as it is already wired, right? That's why your work is so powerful. You're already giving yourself rewards for behavior sometimes. You're already having cues that don't serve you into routines that don't serve you. So simply leveraging this it's not nearly as difficult as it might seem if you'll take an inventory or create cues, create a routine and have a reward. I also think some people are like, well, I should go to the gym. And like you said, everybody goes. This isn't something I should be patting myself on the back for. Not all rewards have to be a pat on the back. It could be, it could be that there are days where I've had good workouts and I'll find myself even doing what we're doing now. I'm sitting here going, I feel good. My back doesn't hurt today. My abs feel strong. That's a form of a reward. It makes
that absolutely is.
So it's this reward feature. And just so we're all clear on what Charles has been saying, if you want to change a habit, you can keep the same cue, right? You can keep the same reward and change the routine in the middle. And that's a formula for change. This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. Hey, listen, we're all carrying around some form of stress, big or small. And you don't want to keep things bottled up. It's healthy to talk out loud with somebody about things that are bothering you or that are weighing on your mind or just decisions that you need to make. And that's why therapy from BetterHelp is one of the most helpful things you can do for learning positive coping skills, how to set boundaries, and it'll empower you to be the best version of yourself. And it's not just for those that have experienced major trauma. Therapy's for people that just want to work through things and maybe learn to make decisions better, work through an emotion that's not serving them right now. And so if you're thinking about starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, it's flexible, and it can be suited to your schedule. All you got to do is fill out a brief questionnaire. You'll get matched with a licensed therapist. If you don't click, you can switch therapists anytime you want for no additional charge. So get it off your chest with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/edshow today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/edshow. Your whole creative state changes when you're in this state as well. Your ability to create. You even make the case that their personality changes, right? Yeah. That there's a personality change. Yeah. And so I want you to address that because you have this unbelievable saying that you say your personal reality is dictated by your personality, right?
Exactly.
And so just step back into that just for a second, the application of it in creativity for people. And then is it a temporary change?
Okay. Thank you for asking the question because we also discovered that you didn't have to have those transcendental moments. Okay. All you had to do is work on regulating your internal state every day. And the novice meditators, people who just came to an event that really had no experience in meditation but immersed themselves for 7 days.
Okay.
Our data suggests at the end of 7 days, their body completely looks like they're in a different life. a completely different environment. The science is pointing the finger at there's strong environmental changes going on in the person's biology, but they're in a ballroom.
Right.
There's not a lot of things happening in a ballroom, but so then how does that happen? Okay. So the application then becomes important for everybody, because when we started looking at advanced meditators that didn't have those transcendental states, but they practiced meditation every day, there was a dosing effect. In other words, the more they self-regulated, the more they were resistant to the things in their environment. Well, let's think about that. If I say to you, Ed, why are you upset today? And you say, I'm upset because of the staff member, I'm upset because of what I heard on the news, there was traffic, I was late. What you're really saying is, my environment, some person, some condition, something in my outer world is actually having control over the way I feel and the way I think.
Right.
And so that's a subconscious program called victimization. Anything that controls you, the way you feel and the way you think, you're victim to. Now, the problem is that the majority of times our response to the environment weakens the organism.
Okay.
That means that your fear, your anger, your aggression, your
weakens
impatience
you.
Weakens the organism, you. So now the environment is actually causing the organism through the stress hormones and the long-term effects to really start down-regulating systems in the body, right? So then,
it's incredible.
So as long as you react to your environment and the response is causing you to become weakened, you're victim to your environment. Well, what makes sense then would you be more susceptible to anything in your environment because you're a victim to it. But the process of change is the difficulty is that 90% of the thoughts you think are the same thoughts you thought the day before. Nerve cells that fire together wire together. Keep firing the same thoughts, keep making the same choices, keep doing the same things, keep recreating the same experiences that stamp the same networks of neurons into the same patterns, all for the familiar feeling called you. And do that enough times, and your biology, your neurocircuitry, your neurochemistry, your hormones, your gene expression stays the same because you're the same. Okay, so then instead of sitting down trying to meditate for 10 minutes and say, then believe in the thought I can't meditate, or I don't have enough time, or I'm a really important person, or I got too many emails to answer, or it's garbage day, or it's my mother's fault, it's my ex's fault, I want to complain, I want to blame, I want to make excuses, I want to lay down, my bladder's full, I like this, what am I doing wrong? They're agitated, impatient. That's the personality that has been hardwired and conditioned emotionally into the past that's resisting the unknown. It would rather cling to suffering than take a chance in possibilities. So our events, we say, okay, here's the knowledge, and I can say now with a great degree of certainty, more than ever, that if you actually do this and you stretch yourself a little bit further than where you would normally go at home, your brain will change. And if you teach people how to do this over and over again, and no different than training an animal. The body is the animal.
Are you training the body that you're in charge? Is that what you're doing?
You're telling the body it's no longer the mind, that you're the mind.
Yes.
And when you do that, those victories add up, and then all of a sudden, there's a liberation of energy. There goes the guilt, there goes the pain, there goes the whatever. It doesn't matter if it's health, it doesn't matter if it's wealth or success. It doesn't matter if it's a loving relationship, a change in a career, a mystical experience. Whatever it is, the person all of a sudden starts to relax into the present moment. Now, let's demystify the present moment.
Okay.
People wake up in the morning and they think about their problems, and those problems are memories that are etched in their brain that are connected to certain people and objects at certain times and places. The moment they wake up in the morning and they start thinking of their problems, they're thinking in the past. Okay, now every one of those problems has an emotion associated with it. So when they feel unhappy, when they feel bitter, when they feel fearful, now their body's in the past. Thoughts are the language of the brain, feelings are the language of the body. Thought and a feeling, image and emotion, stimulus and response. You're conditioning the body to be the mind of that emotion subconsciously. Now the body is believing it's living in the same past experience 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. Why? Because the body's so objective, it doesn't know the difference between the real-life experience that's creating that emotion and the emotion that person is creating by thought alone.
Important. The body doesn't know the difference.
And so the environment signals the gene, that's epigenetics. The end product from an experience in the environment is an emotion. The person's signaling the same genes in the same way. And genes make proteins, and proteins are responsible for the structure and function of your body, and the expression of proteins is the expression of life. And now the person is actually headed for a genetic destiny. And when people labor for the present moment, and they take their attention off of their body, off of all the people in their life, all of the objects they own, their cell phone, their computer, their car, their house, they're no longer identifying with where they're sitting, where they need to be, where they live, where they've lived in the past, where they need to go. And they're not thinking about the predictable future or the familiar past. They're dissociating from everything physical and material, everything known. That is the exact moment we call getting beyond yourself. Okay? Now, when we're in that place then, at the beginning, it's uncomfortable because survival is the unknown. You have better chances of survival and running from the unknown, but that unknown is the perfect place to create from. So in the process, no different than any rehab. In our first 2 days of our event, really, people they're basically rehabbing from their emotional states and their habits, and they're sitting in the presence of that discomfort, right? And the discomfort is because the body is leaving the known. But if the body has been conditioned to be the mind, the moment you take it outside of its familiar territory, it's going to start telling you, Ed, why don't you quit? You know, you're not really good at this. You know, you're more of a physical person. You don't really want to do this. You're not very this or very that. And most people just get up when they do the meditation. They believe that thought as if it's true. Now, the question is, what's on the other side of that thought? Can you sit there long enough till that's no longer the thought you accept, believe, and surrender to? Well, then,
wow.
The next question:
side of that thought?
What's on the other side of that familiar emotion? Can I sit and work with my body and settle it down? Stay. You stay. I'm going to feed you. You're not going to die from this. Your bladder's not going to explode. You're not going to go crazy. And you work with catching those thoughts. It's called metacognition. If you're in that 95% of programming where you're unconscious, then the first step to change is becoming conscious of your unconscious thoughts. So conscious that you would never go unconscious or let that thought slip by you unnoticed.
I want to understand. So you're saying the awareness of the thought, being conscious of the thought, has it somehow lose its power over you?
Exactly. Because just because you have a thought doesn't mean it's true. And if you're left alone to yourself, you'll start believing every thought you think. And that's the problem. So then the majority of people's thoughts then are based on what they perceive about themselves from their past or their life, right? And if you catch yourself complaining and blaming and making excuses and judging someone else, and you say, I want to be a happy person, well, a happy person would never do that. It would make them unhappy. If you notice that you've been feeling guilty for the last 20 years, you didn't know it was guilt because it just felt like you, and you want to feel joy, well, if you can't feel joy, it should tell us volumes about what you've been practicing doing, right? So then most people give up because they don't know that there's anything on the other side of it. So then the next question is, what thoughts do you want to fire and wire in your brain? Well, and with attention and with intention, if you keep practicing firing, wiring those thoughts, you start installing hardware. Do it enough times and it becomes like a software program. And now that's the new voice you program in your head that said, I can do this. I believe in myself.
And you've created, to an extent, a new personality, which can create a new personal reality.
Now, here we go. So then the next question is, how am I going to behave with my kids today? How am I going to be with my wife? How am I going to be with my partner? How am I going to be at work? How am I going to be on my Zoom calls? How am I going to be by myself? How am I going to, what does greatness look like? What would love do today? Now, it turns out that if you close your eyes and you start imagining doing that, if you rehearse how you're going to be in those certain situations, the evidence, without a doubt, shows that your brain will start to look like, through the mental rehearsal of the act, that you've already done it. Now you've installed the hardware. Keep doing it. It becomes a software program, and you'll start acting like a happy person. No magic there. If you don't have the circuits, you can't do it. So the rehearsal then is actually changing the brain just by thinking differently. The brain looks like the experience has already happened. Now you have hardware to use. Do it enough times, you get good at it. It becomes more automatic. Now here's the hard part. Can I teach my body emotionally what my future will feel like before it happens. Now, this is really important because there's a pandemic going on in the world that has nothing to do with a virus. It has everything to do with people's attention span and learning. People need a rush of dopamine in order to catch their attention, or a rush of adrenaline to learn. And so that they're dependent on their outer environment to regulate their emotional state. Now, this is different now. Now, I'm going to say to you, get in that beautiful heart of yours, and I want you to feel gratitude for the event before it occurs. Well, I can't feel it because it hasn't happened yet. Yeah, that's the conditioning. That's the hypnosis. So then when you teach people how to create heart coherence and self-regulate, then it makes sense then with a coherent brain, they can hold the image of their future. They can actually then rehearse who they're going to be. They can bring up the emotions of their future. Now, here's the cool part.
Awesome.
If they can feel their gratitude before their healing begins. If they feel their abundance or their worthiness before they have their wealth, it will start generating abundance. If they start being in love with themselves and being in love with life, they'll create an equal. That's the law. If they're in awe of life or in awe of the moment, they're going to have a mystical experience. If they're empowered, they're going to start stepping towards their success. So then when we wait for the outer world to change our internal state, that's a conditioning process, because some people will live in lack and separation their entire life because they're not creating anything. When this happens, then I'll feel happy. That's the illusion of three-dimensional reality. That's cause and effect, but feeling the emotion ahead of the experience is causing an effect. So the heart, when it's coherent, tends to produce an external magnetic field that's up to 3 meters wide. Now you got a Wi-Fi signal. Now when you have a coherent brain, the brain could actually lay the information on that signal. And the thought of your wealth or your health can be carried on the frequency of that heart emotion. Emotions are the end product of an experience, right? Epigenetics says that's the environment that signals the gene. If the environment signals the gene and the end product of an experience in the environment is an emotion, that person's signaling genes ahead of the environment. And now they're biologically believing, behaving, and actually becoming that person. So if the person sustains that state, and we look at novice meditators that come for a week, and 90% of them, and the metabolites, not just a few, the majority of the metabolites in novice meditators suggest that their body's in a different life.
Great. So you're transcending your environment. People ask me all the time, why does Joe always go back to the health part of the benefit of this? I want to stay in there. And it just dawned on me, because you're a scientist. So the external stuff of attracting the relationship you want, or the money you want, or the emotion that you want is a difficult thing to measure, isn't it? It's a difficult thing to measure. But when it becomes of one's health or well-being, it's measurable.
Right.
So, for example, you say that, and this is how powerful this is. Think about the power of this. Joe's able to tell you that he can actually measure the emotion, the repeated emotion of fear and its impact on the immune system, compared to the repeated emotion of gratitude or bliss and its impact on the immune system. Right. So it's actually a measurable, tangible thing. So address that, stay on there. And then the other thing, we keep using this term heart coherence. I know there's a part of my audience going, okay, what is that? My understanding of heart coherence essentially physically means that your breathing and heart are actually in unison at one point, and that you sustain that over a duration of time. Elaborate on that and go for it.
Coherence is rhythm. It's a cadence. And when you're in fear or you're in survival and your heart rate increases and your respiratory rate increases, your brain waves go up into this aroused state, right? And people spend 70% of their life anticipating the worst case scenario that's going to happen in their life and prepare for the worst. Chronic stress does what? It causes us to hold our breath. All right. So we found, in our research and working with the Heart Math Institute and also some of the stuff we've been doing, that if you slow your breathing down, you slow your brain waves down. And if you teach your body to move out of survival, there's only one other thing it wants to do. It wants to create, right? So now just imagine a big drum. And now you're so contracted that you can't hit that drum. And as you learn and teach a person how to convert from that fight or flight nervous system to the nervous system of relaxation, the heart actually starts to bloom. And when you place your attention on your heart, we have the data. I can say this emphatically. That when that heart starts to beat in rhythm, it starts to inform the brain that it's time to create. Like taking a big sheet and going like this, a wave of energy goes right to the brain. The brain goes right in the alpha and says, it's safe now to create. Examine other possibilities. You're out of survival, right? Okay. So then as you hit that drum repeatedly, there's a wave of sound that's produced, and the more coherent it is, the more it can carry information, right? Okay. Or if you drop a pebble in the water, and you drop another pebble in the water, and you drop another pebble in the water, when your heart is coherent, there's a magnetic field, right?
Do you think, Joe, that, like, I'm just curious, I'm thinking about all the applications of stuff. You know how I'm always the application dude, right? I'm thinking of a guy like, I'm thinking about just a person like I've watched that could embody this in some ways. Do you assume someone like a Tiger Woods or a Brady? I'm thinking like, okay, now I'm an athlete thinking about this. Most athletes, most people going into a boardroom to make a presentation, for example, or to ask somebody out for a date, the more stressful they perceive the environment to be, the more poorly they perform, typically.
Yeah.
So you can take two golfers who both hit a golf ball the exact same way. As the environment changes and becomes, the perception of the environment becomes more stressful. I'm just, right? You're nodding yes for people that are on audio. A guy like a Tiger Woods, when it's the putt to win the Masters and there's 50 billion people watching and it's for legacy, everything's slowing down for him. His heart rate is probably more regulated. He's got more heart coherence at that time, so he's in a creative state, whereas the other person's heart rate is increasing. They're a complete incoherence, and they can't create and function.
And incoherence causes you to overanalyze.
Got it.
And we've discovered this, that if you analyze anything, your life, yourself, within some disturbing emotion, you're going to make your brain worse 100% of the time. In other words, you're thinking in the past, and your thoughts are arousing the brain more into that state of survival. Now, that's when we overfocus. That's when we overthink, right?
So you have the ability to do whatever you've always done the other way. If you've conditioned yourself into the state of anxiety or chaos or fear repeatedly, then you create a personality that creates those elements in your life, and then you reinforce it with your experience.
Exactly.
You can then do the same thing the other way.
That's my point. That's my point. So then the person's having a spontaneous love attack. Mm-hmm. They've done it enough times. Their body's going, hey, it's been about 2 hours without a little love. Well, let me just automatically do that. And so now, when you feel these elevated emotions, it activates the prosocial networks in the brain. Survival creates the protective networks. Like, I don't trust you. I'm separate. You're different. I'm going to do my own thing. I'm selfish right now. It's all about me. Let's compete. Let's fight. Let's manipulate. Let's force it. Let's control it. Let's do matter trying to change matter. That's kind of the program, right?
It is.
So then the opposing part of this is that when people start to connect and they start to have these elevated states, then something really unusual happens. The reality seems to conform in ways that are equal to who they're being. So now the heart is saying to the brain, it's time to create, and now your energy has changed, and nothing changes until we change our energy. And when you change your energy, you change your life, right? And so then the idea then is to be able to maintain that modified state of mind and body your entire day. And as I said, get so good at doing it with your eyes closed that you can do it with your eyes open. Now, if you can sustain that state for an extended period of time, I don't care what you want, and people have created all kinds of things. I use health as the example because it's really relatable. Now, all of a sudden, it's like you're no longer having to go and get it and do something like matter to matter to go get it. And until you arrive at that experience, you're in lack or separation until the experience happens. It takes a feeling like, oh, my God. Well, this is kind of like the opposite. This is like you're not going anywhere. Everything's coming to you. So the thought tends to have an electrical charge in the quantum field. It tends to be the directive. It sends the signal out. And the heart tends to have a magnetic field. It tends to draw the experience to us. So then if you teach people how to create from the field instead of from matter, they will shorten the distance between the thought of what they want and the experience of having it, between the cause and the effect. Now, think about three-dimensional reality. many people can develop the skills to become successful. They can make the right choices. They can study real hard. They can practice. They can get trained. But they're going to follow certain rules of Newtonian physics. It's just going to take time to get what you want. It's just going to take time and hard work. Well, there's nothing wrong with that. You do that for a while, and sooner or later you're going to say, is there another way? Now, this is where it gets exciting. Okay. If it's not matter that's emitting the field, it's the field that's creating matter. If I can change the information in the field, I can change the expression in three-dimensional reality. So if you can teach a person to become nobody, no one, no thing, nowhere, in no time, to become pure consciousness, and disconnect and dissociate from everything physical and known in their three-dimensional reality, and we have data to say that people can do this. Now, all of a sudden, if they become aware that they can actually connect to that field with their awareness, and they're not at Mylett any longer, they're a consciousness, they're awareness in infinite vacuum and in emptiness in space. It would be like the illusion is the virtual reality headset. You're taking the headset off. You can't get the upgrade from inside of it. If you could have a coherent heart and a coherent brain and create from the field instead of from matter, every thought in the quantum field produces a frequency. If you can feel the frequency of that thought and you experience it, you're shortening the distance between the thought of what you want and the experience of it. And you're creating coherent patterns of energy in the field that actually change the hologram in three-dimensional reality. So for me personally, I've done a lot of the matter stuff, got really good at it, and then I just said there's got to be another way. So demystify the process. I don't care what you want. I don't care if it's a trip somewhere or a new life or a new car or whatever. People who do this, what do you think they feel when they see that first synchronicity? You think they're going to be like, oh, I don't want to meditate tomorrow. I'm going to do this. Are you kidding? The synchronicity happens and the energy, the surprise wakes the person up and they go, whatever I'm doing inside of me is producing some effect outside of me. I better pay attention to what I'm doing and keep doing it.
And every human being's had some glimpse of this at least some point in their life. The point is that this can be happening on a regular basis for you. The real irony of all of this is this idea of changing from matter to matter and then moving into a higher space where it's energy to matter. The truth is that when you get there, if we're going a little bit deeper, is that the very thing that you think you want to create in matter, you don't really need to create it.
No, because listen, when you get to when you start connecting to those greater frequencies, you're moving closer to source. And what is source? Pure love. What is it? Oneness, wholeness, whatever you want to call that.
It's right there the whole time.
It's ineffable. It's like it's the most familiar, unfamiliar feeling you'll ever have. And we came from that place, you know. We came from there. And so you're in an experiment called three-dimensional reality, consciousness, and the never-ending process of self-discovery, right? And so now the person who has the synchronicity, who has the coincidence, they're this is what I love about our community more than anything else. They do the work. They're not philosophers. They're not theologians. They're not academic. They are out of the bleachers and they're on the playing field. Every day they're creating. And the person who heals from their disease, they're not saying, why am I not healed? They're saying, what is it about me that I still have to change that will create the healing? This is a different experiment now. And so now we had a guy that came in a wheelchair at an event we did recently. He came in that throne. He had ALS. He walked from the back of the room all the way to the stage, walked up the stairs out of that wheelchair on his own. I asked him, he said, I just have to work on staying in this emotional state because the longer I stay there, the more I'm noticing that my body's responding. He's not saying why am I not healed. He understands that the only way he can actually heal is to change him, right? And so now it becomes very practical, right? It becomes very practical.
Don't you think it's important, that practical part of it? I think sometimes people think they're disqualified if they can't explain something they do well. I'm going to tell you one of the interesting things on the show. Many of the people that do things exceptionally well that have been on my show, athletes or entertainers, really don't do a very good job of explaining it. They embody it. And I think sometimes someone listens to somebody like you who can explain this and think that they're disqualified from becoming good if they can't explain how they're doing it. But the truth is, it's a repeated experience that becomes familiar for them without the need to express how they're doing it.
Right. Again, for me,
This is your life, is teaching people to do this and giving them the tools. But for the vast majority of people, it's creating the experience that they're going to have.
Everybody everybody has done this at least once in their life. What did they do? They sat down and they said, what would it be like to be happy? What would it be like to be healthy? What would it be like to have a new life? What would it be like to be in love? And they asked the question, instead of getting on their cell phone and texting someone or posting, they actually sat there and they actually said, let me answer the question. Let me get uncomfortable here. And what is it that I truly want? What would I have to change about myself to be healthy, to be happy, to be successful? What are my bad habits? They get busy writing down all the choices they want to make, all the things they want to do. They start writing down all their goals, all their experiences, and every goal or experience they write down in their future, there's an emotion. They get inspired, they get optimistic, they get grateful, they get energized, and those emotions fuel more thoughts. And now they're actually changing their biology. And then they do something really, 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 really important. They start looking at the thoughts that they no longer want to think. They write them down. I can't. It's too hard. I'll start tomorrow. I don't feel good. They start looking at the choices they're going to have to stop making. And when they understand when they stop making those choices, it's going to be uncomfortable. That's the hardest part about change. They start thinking about the things they have to stop doing. I got to get off the couch. I got to stop watching this. I got to stop overeating, whatever it is. And then we've all done this. And there comes a moment where you start noticing that, like, you start saying, hey, I believe this is actually going to happen, right? Yeah. And that's when you take the foot off the gas pedal and you start really realizing, wow, I was the resource of actually making this happen. And I changed. Yeah. I changed in the process. So the exciting part about it, you talk to people who created wealth, you talk to people who created relationships, you talk to people who have created health. They'll tell you my disease, my poverty was my greatest teacher. My past was my greatest teacher. They look back at their past, and now there's no longer an emotion associated with it. The memory without the emotional charge is wisdom. Now you get to go to the future. You get to create whatever you're free-willed. You could be anybody you want to be in the process, right?
The memory without the emotional charge. That's how you erase its impact on you from the past. I want to ask you something about that. I've always wanted to ask you this. And by the way, Joe and I, we've flown on my plane together. There's all these times I wanted to ask you this question. And I wondered, because I have created some things in matter in the material world that maybe now I'm at this place where it's dawned on me all along. My fear is that I think sometimes if I think the way I'm about to ask you about, maybe I wouldn't have created any of the material things, which I know is flawed thinking. And it's this. It's that this idea that you can get to this heighted, gamma wave brain state, and you're just fully intentional, right? Having an intention at that time. We have a culture that's been taught for years and years and years to get really clear intention about the physical matter things we want. I want $1 million in the bank. I want a private jet. I want to weigh 150 pounds. But the truth is, we really don't want those things. We want the emotion we think those things will give us. Wouldn't it be smarter for people to get, and very few people ever do, to get clear about the emotions they wish to experience on a regular basis and not the physical matter things?
Well, that's exactly the point. That's exactly the point. And look, people can create all kinds of wealth, Ed. They can create all kinds of abundance. They can have the cars, the homes, and everything. But if they can't be present to enjoy them, I've sat with billionaires and they've looked me in the eye and said, we're all miserable.
Same here.
We're all miserable. And so then at what point do you have to wait to change? Does it have to be that lowest point? Or can you learn and change in a state of joy and inspiration instead of pain and suffering? And that becomes the art, right? So then to change then is to be greater than the habituations, the drives, and the emotions that have been conditioned in the body. To change is to be greater than the conditions in our environment, that every person, every object, everything in our life has a neurological network associated with them. They're knowns because we've experienced them, and we have an emotion associated with them. So if you're not being defined by a vision of the future, you're left with the memories of the past, and you see your ex, and you're going to see your ex through the memory of your past neurologically, and that's going to elicit an emotional response. And you're thinking and feeling equal to your environment, your life's not going to change. So then the next question is, how could I overcome that condition that with my ex? Can I actually forgive? Could I actually open my heart? Can I actually... The reason we do this is because the stronger the emotion we feel towards someone or something in our life, the more we pay attention to them. And where we place our attention is where we place our energy. And so then we're giving our power away to that person or circumstance. That's vital life force you could use to change. The person who's sitting in the meditation and they want to quit, they're thinking they're doing their meditation wrong. I want to tell you, you're doing it right. That's the defining moment, right? And you lower the volume to that emotion, I guarantee you'll take your attention off that person. And sooner or later, when the body finally settles down and you get beyond it, you're going to take your power back. And that's building your own electromagnetic field. Now you have energy to heal. Now you have energy to create. We measured this. Now you have energy for creation, right? So we see this incredible dance that goes on now because we've built the technology between the heart and the brain. So then when the brain and the heart are coherent, my goodness, there's a feeling, well, you can call it the zone or whatever you want to call it, where just you feel like you have enough time to get things done, and no person, no circumstance is going to break you from your state, right? That zone or whatever you want to call that is actually teachable. So do you have to reach gamma to do that? No. We're just knowing that the people that hit gamma, they had an instantaneous biological upgrade. There's the eczema, 37 years of eczema, the next day it's gone. Back to your original question. We have great evidence in testimony, and we have great evidence in our scientific studies. And evidence is the loudest voice, and you can't tell me you're too old to do this. You can't tell me you're too sick to do this. I've seen people with 50 brain tumors that were emaciated, couldn't walk, couldn't speak, on the stage, talking in front of an audience. Can't tell me you're too sick to do this. Now, you examine that person, who comes to the event, and there's no hope. You have 3 months to live, you have 6 months to live, and they're not accepting that or believing that or surrendering to that. They're actually saying there's got to be some other way. There's got to be some other way. If I created this, is it possible that I can uncreate it? So then the person who's on the stage telling that story, and it may have taken them 18 months, but they never missed a day. Why is that essential? Because there were days where they felt so bad in their body, so sick that they didn't feel like doing their meditation, but they did it anyway. There were days they had so much doubt because their condition was actually worsening, and they could have succumbed to their doubt, but they did their meditation anyway. There were days that they were in such incredible fear because the doctor told them it was 3 months and it would be over, and it was the 3-month period, and they had every reason to not do their meditation, but they did it anyway. They could have said, I don't have enough time, I have kids, I got schedules. They found time to do it, and it was the overcoming that was the becoming process.
Becoming.
And when they became that person, what is the side effect of your own personal transformation? For example, most people, when they have a physical health condition, the moment they notice there's a change, like in pain, in something, in their sleep, whatever it is, there's some change, they make the connection right away, and that's when it's the dog on the bone. Now they're doing it twice a day, not because they have to, because that's their medicine. And I have sat with the scientists that have come to our events. I asked them to participate in a week-long event, and the one guy who's looking at the virus outside the cell, I said to him, well, how is this going to change? How is this going to change the way you do research? He said, this is my medicine. I've seen what it does. And people say, oh, are you saying meditation actually can cause your body to be resistant to viruses? I say, no. I'm not saying that. The data's saying that. I'm not. This is not what I'm saying. The data is actually saying that. So what a great time in history to be alive, because you could be young. We have people that are 8 years old, 9 years old. We have usually about between 70 and 100 kids that come to our event that are under the age of 25 and under. We have kids that are 7, 8, 9 years old that participate all the way. I got down on my knees with one of these kids, and we were doing a specific meditation, and I leaned over and I said to him, "How was that?" And he said, "That felt really good." And why do I want that to be a normal feeling for him? Because I want to know who he's going to be. Yeah, you're changing his gene expression at that age, right? And so It's an amazing time. This is a time in history where it's not enough to know. This is a time in history to know how. So my interest, to answer your question, is to demystify the process.
Yep.
No different than learning how to hit a golf ball. Everybody that has a skill that can do anything really well has done the exact same thing that I'm talking about. There's nothing different about it.
Yeah, but you're demystifying by giving us the recipe and the formula and using science to validate it. Really, for the first time. That's really the difference.
Yeah, and but really, don't believe me.
Right.
Don't believe me. Go out and experiment with it.
Yeah.
Go out and experiment. See, if I change my energy, will my life change?
So I heard years ago, you ever hear things that you think is in the Bible and you realize it's not in the Bible?
Yes.
You know?
Yes.
So one of those is that God created everything out of nothing. And I thought, oh, okay, that's what makes God different, right? He created everything out of nothing. But that's actually not what the Bible says. It says, the Bible actually says that God created everything that is seen out of that which is unseen. Now go, wait a minute. Something that's unseen is different than something that doesn't exist. Because oxygen, the atmosphere, is unseen, but it exists. And if it didn't exist, we would suffocate. So the existence of our lives is a proof of this unseen element. And so our scientists explored for this invisible reality called oxygen because of the effect it has on because we can inhale and exhale. And so it was the effect that made us search for the cause. And so then when the Bible says that all that is seen came out of the unseen, I'm going, wait a minute. If God created out of the unseen, what was the unseen? It was the imagination of God. So God created out of his imagination, out of his dreams. He imagined the universe and then spoke it into existence. He imagined this planet with this perfect environment for life and then spoke it into existence. And I'm going, wow. This is one of the things that translates to us.
Yes.
We actually imagine and create. We're the only species on this planet that can imagine something that does not exist and then create it.
Yes.
And that's what makes us unique as a species now. When a human being is not living up to their intention, they're not creating.
Oh, gosh, that's good.
And so then we're now the victim of what others are creating. See, this is the powerful thing about Ed Mylett.
Thank
All
you.
right?
Okay.
People may not realize this, but we're living inside of someone's imagination. Now, you probably didn't design this house, and it's beautiful, by the way.
Thank you.
But when you saw it, you thought, oh, I love this house.
Yes.
And you might even thought, this is the house I imagined.
Yes.
But it's the house someone else imagined.
Yeah.
Every time you walk into this door,
Yes.
you're walking into someone else's imagination.
That's so true.
When we live in this amazing country with all of its problems and all of its shortcomings, we're living in the imagination of Jefferson and Washington. We're living in the imagination of Lincoln. The fact, even while we're working through racial equality and dealing with issues of social injustice, we are still living inside of the imagination of Lincoln ending slavery.
Yep.
We're living inside of the imagination of Martin Luther King Jr. When he said, I have a dream, I dream of a day where a man will be judged by the content of his character, not the color of his skin. When Barack Obama took the oath of office and became the president of the United States, he was literally walking inside of the imagination of MLK Jr. We are all living inside of someone's imagination. But the question then is, are we creating a better future for those that are walking in our imagination? Because Adolf Hitler had an imagination that became a nightmare to the world. There are others who imagine a world that is a nightmare for everyone else. And this is what drove me crazy about Christianity when I first became a follower of Jesus. Christians were so passive. They kept saying things like, oh, if God wants it to happen, it's going to happen. I'm going, where'd you find that in the Bible? Like, it just wasn't God's goal. I would go to events where no one showed up and people said, well, everyone God wanted was here. So I don't think so. I think you're a terrible marketer and you did a terrible job planning this event. I think God's really embarrassed that you put his name on it. And I began realizing that Christians have this passive view of the future. Oh no, God's the only one that can create the future. They're going, no. See, evil men do not wait on God to give them permission to create the future they imagine. But for far too long, good people have been passively waiting for God to create the future. You know how God creates the future? Through you. He gets the future through me, creates the future through us. And one of the things that really attracts me and draws me to you is that you are creating a future for other people that they cannot yet imagine. You've compelled other people to believe they can be successful, that they can own a home, that they can have a career, that they can own their own business, that they can create a better world, not just for themselves, but for others. And every time we translate the power of that imagination into the creative force of creating a future, we've made the world a better place.
Okay, I have to tell you, I've been doing the show for a long time. I no disrespect to any other guest, that's probably my favorite 10 minutes. If we could go back and do that again, I'm going to tell you why for a few minutes. First off, you're amazing. But I have a word of the year. Every year I pray for a word of the year. My word this year has been imagination.
Oh, wow.
And so I'm such a huge believer in what you've just described. And by the way, thank you for those kind words. I feel the same way about you. You also give people the strength and the courage and the faith to chase that. I think most of my friends, my dearest friends, some are financially successful, some aren't. Some are, they're successful in the sense that I love people that are curious. I love people that have imaginations. I also respect people who have the faith and the courage, the strength to step into their imagination and do something about it. And that's what you're just really describing right now. Your dreams, everybody, your visions that you have, these are not hallucinations. These are not jokes God's playing on you. These are glimpses into what's possible in your life if you'll step into it boldly, if you'll be resilient, if you'll be tough, if you'll find the resources, if you'll pray about it, if you'll speak about it and put it out into the world. There's blessings coming your way, maybe not necessarily, to your point, it wasn't God's will, or it may not be your time every single time, but there's a blessing. And I have to tell you, it's so, do you think that that's why? Because a lot of you may not know this about Erwin, but first off, he's written so many amazing books. There's another one that's going to be coming out this fall. What's the one this fall called?
It's called The Genius of Jesus.
The Genius. And what's the premise of that book? I mean, I understand that genius is of Jesus, but I imagine it's brought something to do with human beings too.
Yeah, I spent 40 years studying genius and 40 years following Jesus. And I realized there was an intersection that was unexpected for me, because every list in the world I ever found about geniuses never had Jesus on the list. He's not on a single list I've ever found in the world. And I thought, it's so odd that Muhammad's on lists, Gandhi's on lists, Buddha's on lists, Mandela's on lists, but Jesus never made a list. So I started wondering, if I remove all the divinity from Jesus, does he qualify as a genius? And ironically, the original concept of genius, which came from the Greeks, is genie, that you're touched by the divine. And so the original definition of a genius is a touch of the divine. It's Mozart, it's Beethoven, it's Picasso. It's Hawking's. It's Michael Jordan. Right. It's a touch of the divine. And I started wondering if genius is, in a sense, a small window into the extraordinary nature of God and the potential of humans. Yes. Then the genius of Jesus would be in his living out what it means to be human. And I wanted to search for genius that was transferable. Because if I spend my life with Mozart, I'm not going to come out a musician.
Yeah.
If I spend my life with Picasso, I'm not going to be a painter. But here's an interesting thing. A study was done in the 60s using methodology used with NASA.
Okay.
And they were identifying creativity, high-level creativity genius.
Okay.
The study found that when they translated the children, that 98% of children at the age of 5 came out as geniuses. They tracked those children for the next decade. By around the age of 12, only 30% of them were still geniuses. By the age of 20, only 2% were still geniuses. And so what you find is that human creativity, human genius, is intrinsic to being human.
Yes.
It's natural to who we are. Genius has to be destroyed. It doesn't have to, in a sense, be developed. It's natural to us. And creativity, every human being is creative, but we die so uncreative. Every human being is extraordinary, but we die ordinary. And so in the genius of Jesus, what I try to extricate is the genius that Jesus actually emulates, that he expresses, that he reveals to us, that is available to every single human being. And because I want a world where everyone is living out their creativity, where everyone is seeing their imagination translated into reality as the most beautiful future. I want a world where everyone's genius is awakened. And I believe in that. You may not know this about me, but by the time I was 12 years old, I was in a psychiatric chair. And I spent time in and out of a hospital. And I was told I was retarded. If you looked at me at the time of my life, I was so broken and so fragmented, you would think I would never accomplish anything in my life. And I believed that about myself. I believed that I had no talent, no ability, no
It
intelligence.
took 12
no
years to
gifting.
get the genius out of you and your own belief system.
Yeah, and what it was is that I was fighting, trying to hold on to my uniqueness, and it was driving me insane. I was going to a point of madness, even to a point where I ran away from home quite a few times. But I actually went out to a field and I convinced myself I was from another planet. And I started screaming in the middle of the night that I believed that was like the social experiment to see if our species could live with humans. Yeah. And so I was begging them to take me back. I said, it doesn't work, it doesn't work. And now I know that was just my desperate sense of aloneness that I think all of us struggle with. No matter how successful we are, no matter how much we have in the world, how much other people emulate our lives, we struggle with the sense of connection. Yes. And I think some of it, though, is it's not just a disconnection from each other, it's a disconnection from our core selves. And I look back now and I laugh because they say in neuroscience that the first 12 years you teach your brain what to focus on. Yeah. So if you focus on math, you become a mathematician. If you focus on literature, you become a English professor. Well, I realized the first 12 years of my life I was so messed up, I hid in my imagination. And what ended up happening was I realized I'm either going to use my imagination to escape the world, or I'm going to use my imagination to create a new world. And so now that I'm almost 63, I realized, oh, I've just gone back to my initial space as a child. I never gave up on my imagination. And I understand the power of the imagination to create. And that's what I want to help everyone else rediscover.
Do you believe, I believe that everyone is born with that form of genius. There's a unique giftedness that's wired into us. 2 or 3 unique things. It could be your humor, your beauty, your intellect. Your daughter's this amazing singer. Yeah. You're obviously an incredibly creative person. I'm a client of yours and your clothing brand. I wear your stuff all the time on my Instagram. Every time I get a compliment, so I'm pretty much wearing your clothes, right? You're wearing them today. The way that you write and express yourself. But people think, well, maybe my gift isn't. There's these apparent gifts, as you said earlier. Michael Jordan, 6'6", sure, can windmill dunk and shoot, but there's these gifts that we don't give ourselves credit for. It could be your discernment, your kindness, your sensory acuity, your humor, your touch. You're born with them, and I feel like that. Imagining what those gifts are and how to use them in the service of other people is the most blissful people that I know. And they're across the board. They're school teachers and they're CEOs that are multimillionaires. Yeah. And both of them, what they have in common, if they're happy, if they're successful, A, in my opinion, they know Jesus, and B, they know who they are with their gifts, and they're imagining, I love your word, different ways to use them to serve other people. You seem to do that all the time. If it's your clothes, the writings are just unbelievable.
What happened as you went higher? Take us through for a second, and I played college baseball, Division I college baseball. Mm-hmm. That's a certain level of baseball. That is absolutely not Major League Baseball, though, right? So I know what it took to get to that level, but I also know these other levels. And then to get to the big leagues, to give a metaphor of it, the major leagues of bodybuilding is to get your pro card.
Right.
And then to win a contest is a big deal. But to then win the major, to win the Arnold would be a big deal. But then to win the Olympia. Yeah. Then to repeat and win it again. Then to repeat and win it again and again and again and again, and to do it 7 times. This is a level of the video game that is bonkers for most people, right?
Yeah.
So what's the separator between, and I know you're humble, but don't be for a minute. What did you do? You got the gift. You've always acknowledged genetically, I got a good hand dealt to me. Mm-hmm. But what was different at that level? Because there's a lot of people listening, they want to be that in their business, that in their family, that in their church.
They're lying.
They don't really want it. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, because are they really saying that for themselves, or they're saying that for the world? I think they're saying it to sound cool. I think they're saying it to sound, they're trying to maybe do it for their parents. Mm-hmm. Who held them to a higher standard. Maybe they were young and the love was very conditional.
Meaning you perform, I'll love you more.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think the world is like that.
So do I.
But God ain't like that. Right. So I leaned on my faith a lot, but also I got called out, because I can tell you, if anyone's out there and they want to see how I had imposter syndrome, 2010 Olympia, 2009 Olympia, I had food poisoning. So I did everything in my power to like still compete.
Okay.
EMTs are at my room,
man.
you know, till 5:40 something in the morning. And I was like, God, please, you know, like I just want to, I just want to compete because I just met all these fans from all over the world at the meet and greet, and I don't want to let them down. So I competed and got 5th. I was like, okay. And then I did the Arnold Classic, got 2nd. So I said, okay, I'm getting momentum. And then it's just myself and Jay Cutler.
Who's a friend of yours.
Yes.
Right?
Who definitely was, he's an iconic figure in our sport. And Joe Weider is up there on stage as well. And they're getting ready to read off the next name, being at the, you know, Olympia. And they said Jay Cutler. Now, I was actually happy he won, not because we were friends, but because of how heavy the head that wears the crown.
Really? Holy smokes.
Because you realize when you're friends with someone that is the champion, and he lost his in 08 and then regained it in 09. But I saw Ronnie Coleman with his number 8. And I've seen like how fans treat people. I've seen how reporters treat people when they're multi-level champions and stuff. You go from the hero to the villain sometimes, you know, because people just, I just want to see someone else win.
Yes.
You know, the whole Tom Brady effect.
Yes.
You know? And I saw that play out, and I thought, man, I don't truly feel. I didn't know this right away. I dissect not just game, film, and basketball. I dissect myself in bodybuilding. See, I don't think a lot of athletes do that in our sport. They're posing and stuff, but do they really rewind the tape? Not in admiration, but in critique of their body language. I went by my body language. I exhaled when they read that name. So I started to ask myself, why did you exhale?
You're relieved?
Exactly.
Wow.
I was relieved because of what? I was more concerned over the fact that at prejudging at the Arnold Classic 6 months prior, I was in the lead of beating Kai Green. Then I lost, and I felt, I'll be honest, I felt like I got robbed. And I said, I'm never going to lose to this guy again. Well, I didn't lose to him again. But I didn't win the Olympia. My goal should have been.
Wrong standard. Yeah.
That's been there, done that. Like, who cares?
Yeah.
Not only am I never going to lose this guy again, I'm going to win this freaking show. I'm going to get back. I'm going to get some real get back.
Yeah.
See, I was so focused on just getting some get back on Kai.
Yeah.
That I was comfortable being just friends with Jay, because also I recognize how people treated Jay when he was chasing Ronnie all those years. They always love second place. Oh, you almost had it, Ed. You almost had it, man. Like, you know, come back next year. We love you, bro.
Yeah, don't you think you can oftentimes in life be getting so caught up in beating someone else that you cheat yourself out of the capacity of what you could have been had you were just trying to be your best?
Exactly.
Right.
Run your own race.
When you say that race, though, when you say, hey, I want to unpack what you said there. So I said, hey, a lot of people are saying right now they want to be that level. And you go, no, they don't. They're lying. Is it because you know what's required to do that and most people are not willing to pay that level of price? And that's what they're lying to themselves about?
Yeah. I truly feel that when it's between you and that opportunity, or you and that person who's going for that job, that promotion, how competitive are you really with yourself?
Yeah, with
you
yourself.
Truly have to know who the hell you are to exude that confidence, not arrogance, but that confidence, because you did the work and you're willing to receive the good, the bad, and the ugly that comes with that job.
Yeah.
When I'm no military guy, but I love our military. When we see in a film and they say, I need 5 men to go do this mission, and they all stand up.
Yeah.
Are they scared? No, I don't think so. There might be another person that's scared that didn't stand up, or there may be one person out of that 5 that's like, I guess but I don't think so. I think when they stand up, they know what the assignment is. They know that they may not make it, but they're going to do it because they trained to do this and they love to do this. And in 2010, I definitely looked great. I mean, I looked awesome. In fact, I look back and I'm like, man, I maybe could have won that, you know?
Yeah.
But mentally, I wasn't ready, and emotionally, see, those emotions, I should never claim something that I'm not emotionally conscious, emotionally equipped. I should stand up there. So to fast forward, I told myself, you're the biggest wimp you're a chump.
Really?
You'll never do another interview with Flex Magazine Muscle and Fitness and say you're going to be the champ. Oh, you do the hype thing like, oh yeah, beat your chest. Yeah, man, I'm going for the title next year. Yeah, this is mine. It's like, really? Because you just punked out right there and no one else caught you this time. Maybe the next time their asses will. And you don't like living with yourself.
Wow.
See, so I didn't like living with myself with those terrible standards. But the world, second place, man, ain't too bad.
Right.
You're just right there. You're so close.
Yeah.
Sponsors, second place ain't bad, Phil. Second in the world. We'll go ahead and renew your contract and stuff. Whatever you need. What do I want? Looks cool to see what Ronnie Coleman did. I was there when he won number 8.
You were.
And I got a chance to hang out with him till 7:30 in the morning. And I love that the fact that I got to see it. I got to eat the same food and I got to go to the nightclub. I did all the stuff.
I could see it on your face.
And I'm just pumped, man. Yeah. And I'm thinking like, oh, he was able to, wow, he owns a house. He owned his mom's house. Like he was able to buy the cars he wanted. Like he was able to travel the world and have lines longer than train smoke to meet with him. I met with Ronnie in 2004. I was waiting in that line for 4.5 hours.
You were. Wow.
Then I meet Jay and I see Jay accomplish these things. I'm punking out, man. Don't I want that?
Right.
And I'm probably doing a disservice to every person who's ever poured energy into me. I'm punking out, man. But I still got to choose.
Yeah.
Because they'll still be okay. Because they've never achieved it.
You're right.
Your
But
high
can
school
you live
teacher,
with yourself if you don't?
hell no.
There you go. Yeah.
So I had to plant a flag. I said, hell no, this is mine. And it wasn't even about beating Jay. It was about being the best version of myself.
Love that.
Because I don't care. And we're going there. I didn't give a damn if Ronnie would have came back. I didn't care who was going to step on that stage. If Dorian Yates was reincarnated, whatever, Arnold, whoever. I was like, I'm going against King freaking Kong, man.
Yeah.
And that's what I just felt it in my spirit. And I owned it every rep, every set, every freaking workout, every cardio session. I knew what it was going to require. And then when I won, it's like the synapses in my brain, like it went to like childhood, early adulthood, all these different whys in the road brought me here.
You did. You like flashed.
It was just like super flash. It went all the way back when, I was just a kid and seeing violence, seeing my parents split up when I was 3, like what that felt like to being told, later on, like you didn't make the basketball team, to being on the team, to winning state, to going to play college, didn't like your coach, like how it made you feel, going through mental health issues in college, like to get into bodybuilding, to turning pro, to, meeting Joe Weider, to then literally, even before that, like having no money, because bodybuilders, you have no money, had no money, but finally met Joe Weider, got a signed contract, literally had a car that was flooded and had no forms of transportation to sign with Joe Weider, taking that $5,000 check, buying a 2001 Lincoln LS8.
Nice.
Bringing that car back, wearing the shorts, wearing the tank top, wearing the bandana, looking like Sean Ray, and I get in an accident 2.5 hours later. I get rear-ended.
That's awesome.
I get rear-ended right before I turn pro, like 2 weeks out, having to go through, oh my gosh, my back goes out a week before, to all these different things.
Your back went out the week before you won the Olympia?
No, the one before I won my pro card.
Oh my gosh.
So wow. I'm like,
that's just
I did all this stuff.
Yeah, to lead to that moment.
To lead to that moment, I was like, man, I didn't give up, man.
That's so awesome.
Thank God, man. I didn't give up, man, because I'll tell you, like, if I would have gave up and I would have just been comfortable, that would have been my new comfort of being second.
Oh, wow. It's so good.
I would have never gone there. And
this is good. This is good.
That, oh my gosh, that feeling.
Yeah. So you didn't immediately feel, I'm just curious. So you win, your dream happens. So you're saying making your dream happen, say this for everybody, or let us in on it, exceeded, met, or didn't meet your expectations, like emotionally when you hit it?
I had arrived.
That's cool.
That's how I felt. It was all worth it. This is your new start. Because now you're Mr. Olympia. You're not these guys. You've already beat them. You've already that's in your rear view. And fans may look at that as like, oh, that's cocky. It's like, no, man, I did the work. Right. I know the secret to my own success.
You found your recipe.
Right. And can I tweak it now? Absolutely. How did Ferrari win all those championships? They tweaked it.
Very good, Phil.
Right?
Very good.
What was it? 0 to 60 in 8 seconds, the first car, and then, you know, they got better and better and better. I look at that and I say, well, why not me?
Very good.
So I put something out there that was nuts. I said, I'm going to win 10 of these damn things.
That's great.
And people were like, this guy, freaking arrogant a-hole, blah, 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 blah. I'm like, well, wait a minute. If your kids tell you, dad, mom, stranger, what do you want to be when you grow up? And they say, doctor, lawyer, I want to be entrepreneur, YouTuber, whatever. You don't piss on their parade.
Right.
So who are you to tell me any different?
Yeah, throw it out there.
Here's the irony. You winning a Super Bowl didn't inspire anybody. Really doesn't. They can't even relate to that. You looking like this, people tell you and I, this inspires me.
Right.
But the fact of the matter is, they're like, it's more like I'd like to be like you, but I can't be like you.
Right.
Okay. What's inspiring in life is not the great things you achieve. What's inspiring in life is overcoming the things in your life that hold you back. And so for the first time, bro, in your life, you're authentically being inspiring. Inspiring, the root of the word inspire is to be in spirit. So what you were doing before is motivating. That's motives. I want to touch your motive to make money.
That's a powerful way of
it is.
looking
Motive you to get a good, motive is to get a good body. Motive is to win the Super Bowl. Motive is to achieve. These are motives. That's motivation. You've been extremely motivational throughout your life. That's not inspirational.
Right.
Inspirational is spirit to spirit.
I'm gonna take that with me, man.
It's true.
That's powerful.
Inspirational is, hey man, I don't feel good about myself either.
Right.
Hey brother, I've been hurting. Hey man, I've had some substance issues. Hey man, like I got this unbelievable family, and sometimes when I'm with them, I'm not happy.
Right.
I have these beautiful spirits here. What's inspiring is to hear that and then to see you turn it around.
There's been so many amazing things that have come into my life in the last 21 days, and I haven't tried for any of them. Like, I didn't call you and say, hey, you could do this podcast. Like, you called me.
Yes, right.
And I was like, are you kidding me? Dude, I'd be honored. You know what I mean? I've been waiting for this day. And I dropped everything that I had planned today because this is something that was on my bucket list, and it wasn't on my bucket list to build my brand, to grow my business.
Yeah. Yet it will do that. Isn't that the irony?
And that's a crazy thing. It's
Yet
just
it
like,
will do that effortlessly.
It will do that.
It's what most people do is the reverse of you. So what most people do is your imposter life, right, to some extent, was an achievement life. It's like one of the great lives. Like if we just said, okay, everybody born, you're 35, 34?
35.
35. We drew the line. Everybody born the same year as you. Let's add up their life.
Yeah.
You'd been the 1/1,000,000th of 1% of the best external lives, right? So you're kind of masking this guy thing, cause achievement. Most people that are watching this, the manifestation of their mask is they're playing it safe, someone else's life. I'm making everybody, I'm working the career my dad told me to. I'm going to the college my parents wanted me to. I'm doing what my wife thinks I should be doing. My husband thinks I should be doing this, this, and this. And every time I try to do something different, I get criticism, I get pain. And so you always go back to your safe spot. Your pattern's different. Your pattern is every single time I start to feel this way, I go to an aggressive, vulnerable, crazy spot. Like I'm going to go achieve more. But a lot of people, the same feeling manifests themselves in comfort. I'm just going to stay in this box. Everyone likes me in this box. They like me when I'm normal. They like me when I don't chase my dream. They like me when I'm not changing. They like me when I'm not growing. And so your choice to deal with the mask is to be the person everybody else expects you to be. And so what you got to decide when you're watching this, if he has the courage to have achieved all this, and to say, hey, I'm making changes. Your change is to stop playing it so freaking safe.
Yeah.
Your change is to stop playing small. At least you took this struggle and played big. Yeah. And you need to give yourself credit for that, brother. Most people take the struggle and play small. Okay, what I'm here to tell you and what you're now realizing is you don't have to struggle. And one of the things we've not covered that is such a critical part of communication, and maybe more important even what you say, is your ability to listen to people. It's a huge part of communication. You know, I've taught you before that people don't respond to what they hear or see, they respond to how they feel when they interact with you. And one of the best ways to make somebody feel good is that they feel listened to and that they feel heard.
And it's one of the skills that I struggle with the most, which is why I'm so excited to cover this with you today, because quite frankly, it's something that I've struggled with myself, is my ability to just be present and to listen to people. And so like many of the shows, I'm excited to teach these things to you for your own benefit, but it also helps me in owning this material. And frankly, anything you teach to people, you end up owning more yourself. And so very, very excited to cover this with you here today. And like I said, it's not something I've been very good at my entire life, is being a great listener. So I want to get right into it. And what caused me to do the show today is really two things. I had someone join me on my jet a few weeks ago on a pretty long flight. And there was a group of people, but one particular guy who's an entrepreneur, and I won't say who he is, but he spent a 3-hour flight with me on my jet. So he spent about 3 hours with me, about 1.5 feet from me. And for 3 straight hours, he did not ask me one question about myself. He did not listen to one thing I had to say, didn't ask me for any advice, and he talked about himself for 3 hours. And this is somebody prior to that flight that I really liked. I was struck, and so were other people on the flight, that when they landed, and I don't mean that I'm a big deal or anything like that, but they were shocked why a rising entrepreneur wouldn't take advantage of the time of being with me to ask me questions. I think most of you, if we spent 3 hours together, you'd probably want to ask me a question or two. And he did not ask me one single question. And he talked about himself and his life and his background and what he had achieved and what he was going to achieve and what he was good at and all those things. And it was probably true. But I found myself when the flight was over, quite honestly, not liking him quite as much as I did before the flight, because people don't like to hear about you all the time. People want to feel heard. They want to feel listened to. And he didn't do any of that the entire flight. Plus the fact he didn't learn anything that flight. So remember this. I know there's the old adage that you have 2 eyes and 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason, and you ought to use them in that ratio, but really you should even use your mouth even less. And so the 2 things happened on that flight. 1, he didn't get anything out of it. He didn't learn anything. And 2, it made the people around him, quite frankly, not care for him to the extent they could have, because he's a really good guy. But he just talked the entire time. And I don't think he did it out of ego. I think he did it because he was nervous. And so that's one thing I want you to check in the very beginning. When you get nervous, I do, when you get nervous, do you begin to talk more? One of the great things about my show is that I've had to learn to listen more. And people say all the time, one of the reasons they like my show is I seem so excited and so interested in what people are saying, because I sincerely am. I've learned that being a great listener is easier than being a great talker. Because being a great listener, the pressure's off you to come up with the perfect thing to say, right? The perfect response, the perfect phrase that sounds smarter or better than somebody. You don't have to do that when you're a great listener. And people's favorite topic, number one, remember this, people's favorite topic is themselves. They love to talk about themselves. One of the things I've found over and over in my life, and my friends get a kick out of this, but when I play golf, you'll spend 4 or 5 hours with somebody when you're on a golf course. And oftentimes my friends will tell me, man, Dave really liked you, Ed. Like, he really enjoyed the time with you, Eddie, so much. But he doesn't know anything about you. And one of the reasons they like me so much is I don't talk about myself. I love to talk about them. I love to ask questions about them. And so it's interesting. When we're done, they really, really like me, and they know nothing about me. And they wonder why they like me. But the reason they like me is I allowed them to talk about themselves. Plus the fact, the way I look at life, I already know about me. I'm not going to learn anything else by talking about myself. I'm going to learn by asking them questions about them. And so I think being a great listener has lots of benefits. 1, people will like you more. 2, you're going to learn more. 3, it takes the pressure off you. And so listening skills are so critical. And even as we cover this, you may say, I'm a great listener. Well, let's go through some things and see how good we all are. Because even on my show, I'll be honest with you, I watch replays back of my show, and I interrupt too much. I jump in too much. I finish people's sentences for them too often. And that's an ego thing, almost like I think I can say it better than them. In fact, I'm so bad at it, I'll be honest with you. Before every show, I tell them, hey, this isn't like any other interview you've been on before. I'm going to interrupt you. You can interrupt me. We'll make it like a real conversation. And all of my guests always politely say, wonderful, that's great. I want you to cut me off. But the truth is, that's not how a great conversation goes. It's not 2 people interrupting each other all the time. It's 1 person talking, another person listening until they're finished speaking, and then responding. So this is something I'm not very good at. And so I teach this to you today, not being critical of you, but knowing that it's something I'm going to have to get better at myself. So here we go. Let's talk about some critical steps of being a great listener. There's this thing that's out there too that says, hey, when you're speaking to a woman, she doesn't want you to solve her problems. She just wants you to listen to her. You've all heard this before, right? Men, that's different. Let me tell you, none of this stuff is gender specific. It's not true at all. Nobody wants you to solve their problem necessarily, not right away.
Everybody wants to be heard. Everybody wants to be listened to. Everybody likes to talk about themselves. And so just please remember that. This is not gender specific. Men and women aren't different on this. Men like to be heard as well. Men like to be important. Men like to be funny. Men like to be interesting. Men want to share their ideas and thoughts and worries and fears with other people just like women do. So remember this. You don't always want to just go solve their problem right away. Next thing is this. Always be asking people for understanding so that when they say something, when they're finished speaking, ask them, so what I think you're saying is, or what I'm hearing is, or clarify this for me. Because this shows how deeply you were listening when you ask for clarification. And what I'm hearing is, by the way, when you say the sentence to somebody, so what I'm hearing is, that lets them know you were hearing them, that you were listening to them. So as I was listening to you, this is what I understood. Help me understand, clarify for me, because this gives a deeper sense you were listening to somebody. The next thing is what I'm doing right now with you. Make eye contact. Look right at them when you're talking to them. Don't be distracted. Don't look around. Don't look at your phone. The way you tell me I'm important is by looking at me. I have a significant person in my life, and one of the things that drives me crazy is I'm always saying, are you listening to me? And she's always like, yes, of course I'm listening to you. And I'm like, well, could you look at me and let me know you're listening to me? I'm not going to say who that is either. But we all have that person in our life who they're listening, but they don't know to let us know they're listening. One of the best ways you can do that is by just looking right at somebody, nodding with them when they say something you agree with, right? Smiling when it's funny, like giving a normal response. You'd say, well, this is basic stuff. You'd be surprised how often you look away, how often you're not focused. The next thing is check your body language. Are you leaning in? Are you welcoming? Are you warm? Or are your arms crossed when you're talking to somebody? See, I have this tendency when I'm really listening, I get really drawn in. One of the things I do is I get very serious. And I almost begin to grimace and make a face because I'm so interested. I'm in deep thought. But what happens is my visual on my face doesn't indicate to them that I'm enjoying what they're saying or that I'm listening very deeply. So make sure that your facial expression, this may seem basic, but your facial expression matches the moment, matches the emotion. Some other people do something different. They're always smiling when something very serious is being said. That's not an appropriate facial expression, and it looks like you're not listening, or it disconnects the connection, if you will, no pun intended, between you and that person. So check your facial expressions. Make sure you're looking at them. Check your physiology and your body language. The next thing is that when someone's talking, the highest form of listening is to let them finish their sentence. Do not interrupt them. Do not interrupt them. I do this all the time when I get excited. Oh, really? Almost like I want to jump in and get my point in before they're finished, or I want to sound smarter, or if I don't say it now, I'm going to forget to say it. Probably the number one weakness in my ability in listening to people is my desire and tendency to jump in before they finish their thought. And what that says is, my thought's more important than yours. My needs are more important than you. I'm done listening to what you're saying. Be careful to say things like this when they're talking. Uh-huh, right, got it, yeah, wow, Because what that does is, it's called a nudge. You're nudging them along verbally to finish. It's like, hurry up, I got something to say. Uh-huh, right. And that nudges them verbally. I used to think that those were things I was saying that confirmed what they were saying, but it was really what was really happening is I would nudge. Better is that when they're done, you say, wow, or that's interesting. Or you at least respond when they're finished. All responses are wonderful once they're finished speaking, but don't do the verbal nudges that get them to speed up and finish. Don't finish sentences for people next. It's another thing I do. They'll be saying something and they'll be struggling for a word, and I give them the word. Let them find the word. It's their word, not yours. And you're stealing control of the conversation from them and making them feel like you're not listening to them. Don't finish their sentences. Don't give them better words. Don't talk over them. Don't interrupt them. These are all things that we all kind of do from time to time when we get excited. I'm not suggesting if someone is making an incredible point that you don't begin to laugh or jump in. When it's your pattern with somebody, you're not being a good listener. Also, use acknowledgement statements when they're done. I agree. That's wonderful. That's amazing. Congratulations. Like, do things like that that acknowledge what they said, because when you acknowledge what they've said, they feel open. That's an invitation to say more. But when you don't acknowledge what they've said, you don't give a statement to it when they're done, then they don't feel comfortable continuing to speak. And so ask probative questions. So when you ask somebody, for example, if they're new to you, do you have kids? They say, yes, I do. A follow-up question is, what are their names? What are their ages? Begin to learn the volley of follow-up questions. The more specific questions you ask, the more what I call follow-up questions, the more and more interested you appear to somebody. Let me give you one more huge thing in being a great listener. Where appropriate, you touch somebody. So when they're talking, if they're leaning in, it's an emotion, when you grab their hand or you touch their knee, or when they're finished speaking, you shake their hand or hug them or pat them on the shoulder. And by the way, this has to be appropriate, right? Especially when you're talking about different genders. Be very careful of this. But one of the ways you anchor in, I'm listening to you, is with a touch. It anchors in the emotion. And so I'll often be careful when I shake their hand of touching them or touching their shoulder or hugging them when we're done or patting them on the shoulder or knee or something like that that just acknowledges I'm hearing you. If it's a guy, maybe it's a fist pump or a high five, right? But it acknowledges the listening and it encourages them to continue. So that is a little bit gender specific, but I just want to reinforce to you that that just shows you're listening. Then there's a series of questions I think you should ask yourself, just sort of a checklist of whether or not you're a great listener. So ask yourself this, in conversations you have, do you intend to do more or less talking than the other person? This is a huge one for me, especially in business or even in social as well. Do I talk more than them in the conversation? If I've come out of a good conversation, I've talked less than the other person has talked. Man, is this a difficult one for me, particularly when you're in a position of authority with somebody, when they're asking you a lot of questions and you're just answering. Make sure you're feeding questions back to them. A great conversation is at least a 50-50 split, but I think the best of them, they've talked more than me. That way, I think I've given them more of my emotion and caring and concern than they've given to me. So ask yourself, what are your ratios in your average conversations? This is true, by the way, in everything. In your business meetings, in your sales meetings, with your children, with your spouse, with your friends, with someone you're comfortable with for 30 years and someone you've met for 30 seconds. Who talks more in your exchanges? Number two, when you don't understand what they're saying, do you ask them questions? This is such a huge form of connection with people. Oftentimes, if we don't understand something somebody said, we don't ask them a question about it because it may make us look not so smart or not very prepared. But the way that you really indicate I'm listening to you is, hey, can you help me understand this? And you ask for understanding. I didn't understand what that word meant, or I'm not sure who Bill is that you're referring to. Bill who? Right? When you begin to ask questions of understanding, the connection deepens with that person. Another question to ask yourself is, when you're in a conversation with somebody, do you often try to figure out what they're going to say before they finish saying it? This is an indication that you're not present with them when you're listening and you're trying to get them to finish speaking so that you can jump in and say your very important thing. So don't be trying to project forward what they're about to say, because that means you're not listening in the present, and there's a disconnect when you do that. So ask yourself this, do I often or ever try to project forward what they're going to say before they've said it? Next, do you find yourself just not paying attention when somebody's speaking to you? I mean, maybe you are looking around, or do you find yourself just thinking about other things when people speak to you? This is a value issue. It really means that these other things are more important to you than what this person is saying. And when you begin to build a habit and a pattern of truly not paying attention, one of the reasons I enjoy my interviews so much, and quite frankly, my connection with my guests are so long lasting after the program, is because I am so interested in what they're saying. And I'm interested in what all people are saying. If you were my Uber driver, I think my Uber drivers would tell you, man, this guy is overly interested in what I'm saying. And my cameraman, Mike, is nodding right now because he's been in enough Ubers with me to know I talk to everybody. I think people are gifts, and I believe the way you open them up is by asking them questions. And so I don't care if you're a server in a restaurant, my Uber driver, a guest on my show who's worth $1 billion, or the top athletes in the world, my pattern of conversations with people is very similar. I'm interested in what they're saying sincerely, and I think you should just begin to ask yourself that question. Are you sincerely interested in what they're saying? Because they can feel this intuitively. Another thing to ask yourself is, in a conversation, can you intuitively sort of tell the difference between what somebody is saying and what they really feel? Why is this so important? Because oftentimes people wear social masks with us, don't they? And they'll tell us things, frankly, that just aren't true or don't completely confirm the way they're feeling about something. And so a deep level of listening is you can almost feel what they really sense about something or what they're really feeling, not just listening to the words. This is a way of connecting with someone. They don't even know you're connecting with them, but their words don't match their feelings. And when you can connect with their real feeling, man, have you not only got influence over them, but most importantly, you've got a connection with them. Next one. In conversations with people, do you find yourself finishing their sentences or supplying them with better words? Don't do that. I have this mistake sometimes where I finish their sentence for them, right? And I think, oh, we're connecting, I'm with you. That's not what it does. It disconnects you from somebody when you use a better word or a different word. They say, you know what, I really was just Just really sad. Oh, you were just really bummed out then, huh? You've rephrased something for them. Another way of listening the wrong way, I think, is do you sometimes only hear the facts and details they're given and not listening for the emotion behind it? Just listening for the emotion from somebody gives you a much deeper level of connection with them than just listening to the facts and figures. This is important, especially in sales, when someone's giving you facts and figures back. If you can connect with the emotion of it, big, big difference. Lastly, do you struggle with seeing things from that person's perspective, like really connecting with them, really empathizing with them, really believing in them? This is so important when you're listening to somebody, is to really try to connect with their point of view. Because the way you help influence me is if I can meet you where you are, I can take you where we need to go. But if I can't meet you where you are by letting you use your words, your emotions, listening for the emotion behind it, really listening for your point of view. Maybe you sell cars, for example. This person's had a really traumatic time buying cars in the past. They're very skeptical about it. You've got to be able to see it from their point of view. This is true with getting your children to behave differently or interacting with your spouse. It's critical that you meet with them where they are and take them where you're going. So why are all these skills so important, especially from a business perspective? Because this has been very detailed, very granular. The reason it's so important is because to really influence somebody, they have to trust you. And the way you do that is by building rapport with them. So one of the things I used to do incorrectly is I brought all this massive energy. You ever heard people say, you gotta bring the most energy? The highest energy person does win. But the way that you really influence somebody is by connecting with them and listening and then matching them physically and their tonality as well. So when I talk back with somebody, I listen for their tonality. I listen to the volume of their voice, the pace of their voice, how they speak. I begin to try to match by listening to them, the words they use, the tonality they use, and the volume they use. If they use a certain set of words from time to time, if you were listening closely, if you then use some of those same words back to them, you connect. So this is a form of influence. If this person sort of repeatedly used the words literally, you've heard that word 3 or 4 times, when I'm then going to be saying my stuff back to them to influence them, I'm going to use the word literally. This is a connection word. It's part of the words they love. When I use words they love, I can influence them. This is a huge thing in influence, in closing, in moving people to make decisions that are best for themselves. If they talk at a pace like this, just like I'm talking at this pace right now, and I'm talking like this very fast, I break connection and we can't have rapport. So I want to listen for the pace that they speak at, the cadence, also the tonality. You know, do they talk kind of hunched over and quiet? I want to talk like that and a little bit better. If they talk at a certain volume, if they talk like this, I don't want to talk like this. At the same time, if they talk like this, I don't want to talk like this. I wasn't listening for their volume level. We want to match their volume level. And so when you begin to match and mirror like this, use the words they use, just a few of them, don't overcook it. But when they've got 3 or 4 words they use and you use 1 or 2 of those words, I can promise you, you connect. When you speak at a similar pace to them in tonality, you connect. When you speak at a similar volume to them, you connect. If there are hand gestures, as I'm listening and observing them, they use. If they're constantly folding their hands like this, if you're on audio, I'm folding my hands right now. They pray, or they have their hands down, or they do some sort of a gesture with their hands or shoulders, I will oftentimes, I'm watching, this isn't manipulation, this is connecting with people. I'm listening so closely, I can see their physical moves as well. If there's emotions I hear them go to often, which is regret or sadness, let's just say, they keep telling me stories about things they regret or they're sad of, I will share with them one of the things I regret and bring them with me. If they talk about, past achievements, or they talk about, some material things, then I'll talk about some material things or past achievements. I'm listening for them to give me the language, the words, the tonality that I can move them with. And this is also true in every area, but particularly in influence when we're trying to persuade people. So the reason this is so important is people have go-to words. And so if you're really listening closely, not only are you connecting better with me, but they will tell you the 3 or 4 words they use a lot. Every human being does this, by the way. You do it too. You have a few words you use more than most. And if someone's really listening closely, they can hear what those words are. And if I use 1 or 2 of those words back with you, I've connected with you on a deeper level. The next thing that's huge, by the way, in listening is to repeat back to them what you believe they've just said. Repeat back to them what you've heard. This is what I've heard. This is what I'm hearing. This is what I'm listening to. This is true when I'm interacting with my children. Before I just tell them I want to do something, I listen to them and I say, here's what Daddy's hearing. Is this true? And that's really been bothering you regularly. Is this something? So when I'm listening to them, they know I'm listening. Use acknowledgement statements. It's not done enough. People love to be complimented. I love to be complimented. You do. So after I've listened to you, after you've told me what you need to tell me, I want you to learn this sentence, everybody, right now. I just want to acknowledge you. I think you're amazing. I think you're incredible. Thank you for sharing this with me. That's awesome. And it might be with guys. You don't say, hey, bro, that was cool. Thanks, man. Man, I always love connecting with you, brother. You're my brother, right? Always do a connection statement. Always do an acknowledgement. That's why I love you, man. Whatever it is, you know, people talk differently depending on who they're around. Someone you've known 30 years different than someone you've known 30 minutes. But the fact of the matter is, I always do connection, man. I love you, brother. Thank you so much. That's why we're so close, man. That's why I love being around you. Whatever it is, you begin to say acknowledgement statements to somebody because it connects the conversation. It's what I call a post frame. After someone said something, the last thing I want you to focus on, children, spouse, business, brand new person in a social environment, or someone you've known 30 years, acknowledge them. Thank you, that was awesome. Great meeting you, if they're new, right? I get out of a new, I go, man, I enjoyed our time so much, thank you. That's post-framing what we just talked about. If it's someone I've been with a long time, say, hey, brother, man, that's why I love you, bro. That's why I love you. And then other people, it's like, you always inspire me. You fire me up. Thank you. I love how vulnerable you are. Whatever it is, I just want to acknowledge you. I just want to tell you how much I appreciate you. I just want to thank you. I just want to tell you you're awesome. I just want to tell you I believe in you. Do an acknowledgement statement that post-frames what you've covered, and I promise you, you've now put a bow around being one of the great listeners that anyone will ever be around. It's going to make you one of the most well-liked and most influential people that you know. And by the way, isn't that what we're after in life? Being well-liked and being influential. And that usually comes down not to being an incredible orator, but being an incredible listener. And these are the skills, and these skills matter in every area, in building a church, in building a Boy Scout troop, in building a softball team, in building a business, in building any family. Anything in life is that we want to be able to be liked and have influence, and that always comes down to what we make people feel. And more than anything, people feel great when they've been able to talk about themselves, but most importantly, they feel listened to, connected with, and acknowledged. Listened to, connected with, and acknowledged. This is how we have influence over people. This is also how we make a difference in people's lives. The final piece of the puzzle is this, is that because of social media, we have such an advantage. And I just want to tell you something that doesn't happen enough, but when it has happened for you, man, does it feel like the connection's even deeper. It doesn't matter what it is that when your separation from that person takes place and they leave you, especially if they don't live with you, whether that be a client, a best friend, a new friend, or someone you just met, following up a little while later with a text that just says, I enjoyed our time so much. I enjoyed listening to you. Thanks for sharing this with me. And maybe repeating back to them what you heard a little bit of. And when you do that, it cements them. Not only did he listen to me or she listen to me in my presence, but they continued to listen to me after I was gone. They continued to connect with me. And this extends the connection and deepens the connection when after you physically separated. And even, by the way, if this communication happened by phone and you weren't physically with them, for you to follow up after a phone call with a text a few hours later that just says, man, I enjoyed the talk so much. Thanks for sharing that with me. Or always love when we connect. Or you always make me laugh. Or I'm so glad we're new friends now. I feel like I've made a new friend. Whatever it is, you strengthen and deepen the connection with people by letting them know later, hey, I heard you. Hey, I listened to you. So not only doing great in their presence, but later confirming for them, I was with you. I heard you. I enjoyed it. I want to acknowledge you. Man, have you deepened the fact that you've listened to him. So today was about tactical stuff. I know it wasn't the most motivational thing in the world, but I feel like this is another thing in your tool bag that'll help you live blissfully, to achieve your dreams, to be more fulfilled. And it's something that we overestimate when we think we're good at it. When you hear it sort of laid out like this, you think, man, I could be a better listener. There are tactical things I could do better.
How do you talk with somebody if it's a difficult conversation? One of the things I saw that you said is you ask in your writing, do your patterns of judging others reflect behaviors you don't like or want to recognize or won't recognize about yourself? So when we're in a difficult conversation with somebody, you know, maybe we disagree with them. I want to go to the hard stuff first. Like I'm a Republican and someone's a Democrat, or I'm a Democrat and someone's a Republican. Something like that, you know, these hard conversations. What are some of the keys in being better at doing it so it's actually a productive experience?
There are definitely keys that we're going to talk about. And it's also important to know that when you're in a difficult conversation, both parties have to be willing to start with truth. And if we can't have a foundation of truth, then you're going to have the conversation will remain difficult. There's opinions and there's facts and there's emotions. And we get all of those mixed up, right? And they all get discombobbled and jumbled up in our brain. But if we realize that my opinion is just my opinion and it's not the truth, then we can say, okay, what's driving my opinion? And we sort of can open our hand and go, this is why I'm thinking how I'm thinking. This is what my standards are. There's 4 archetypal questions in the book. This is what I'm worried about. This is my concern. Here's what I'd like. We can start to just open our hands and say, okay, I have an opinion. Let's dance with that. And let's see what we can learn from each other. That's a very different conversation with fists than fists coming at each other.
Yeah. You also say in the book that I've learned to do this myself, is to fall in love with asking questions.
Right.
When you're talking with somebody, whether you're a business leader and trying to create change in your company, or whether you're in an argument with a spouse or disagreement, or you got to talk about something different. Like I've used politics as an example because it's the big one, right? Like they're good, we're bad. I'm right, you're wrong. And the idea of making statements all the time and telling stories as opposed to asking questions.
Right. And the idea of whether I'm doing it to myself and asking myself what's driving my opinion, what's driving my judgment, and why am I so hooked on the thing, right? We can also, the questions help us, like each question can help us open someone else's hand. Because we can ask, well, what do you really want? What do you desire here? What do you want out of this? What are your standards for measuring this opinion that you have? So our questions can literally help other people unlock and unfist, right?
Yeah.
But we aren't trained to ask questions. We're trained to have answers. That's one of the major dilemmas. And then we get into school and we're rewarded for raising our hand. And then we get into business and we're rewarded for being the smartest person in the room, right?
Right.
And that's a counter to the opposite effect is asking questions.
Well, this notion of raising your hand was my next thing. So you're reading my mind. And I think one of the art forms of being a great conversationalist is actually the art of listening. And that's why questions matter so much. And you're precisely right. In school, the teacher's still talking and asking the question. We're taught, we're rewarded. Raise your hand while they're still talking. And what that does to me, I want you to speak to this. To me, what that does to me is it means I'm really not listening to what you're saying. I'm already thinking about what I'm going to say back to you in my answer or my judgment or my assessment about you. Most people are already raising their hand, you know, metaphorically, when most other people are still talking, and they wonder, why am I not connecting with this person? Why can't we find common ground? Because while they're talking, you've got your hand raised already. I got the answer. I know the truth. I want to say something, and rather finishing and letting them finish their statement.
Yeah. So our brain is spinning our answer. And so there's no space actually to absorb what's coming at us from the other person. Right. And part of that, actually the main reason of that is we get addicted to our position. Our ego and our identity gets addicted to, I believe this. And if I believe this is true, then that defines who I am. And that is often why we enter with fists or why we enter, defensively, and can't just say, okay, I do have an opinion. I'm going to set that aside and I'm going to see if I can explore really what's driving this other person's thinking.
But if I just want to go back for a second, everybody, first thing to ask yourself is, what's your ability to ask questions and to ask questions without judgment as someone's answering you? In other words, can you learn the art of not raising your hand metaphorically when someone's talking and be fully present with their answer, absent as much as you can of judgment?
You said something, the antidote of that in Girl Wash Your Face, which if you've not gotten this book, men and women both go get this book. I've probably never read a book so quickly. One thing about the book that's really interesting I wanted to tell you too is that usually when I have a book, I highlight the parts that I like. And this book was so good that I probably should have highlighted the parts that weren't meaningful to me because there's so much just highlighter all over the book. It's really true. It's just like every page I'm just like,
thank you.
One thing you say in there is you say, and this is true for all of us, we need to drop this. You say, comparison is the death of joy. And the only person you need to be better than is the one you were yesterday. So speak to that just for a second.
Well, this is a massive, I don't know if men experience this, but this is a massive problem with women, is they're constantly comparing themselves to her life, to her Instagram feed, to her kids, to her marriage. They're comparing their real life to someone else's highlight reel.
Sheesh.
And so they are forever coming up lacking. They forever feel like they're not enough. And I get it, because the times that you tend to compare yourself are when you are most insecure about something. So you're like, well, I'm not sure how to do this. I'll look outside myself to find the answer. I always talk about when I was a new mom, that was when I was most insecure. And so I would look at Pinterest, I would look at magazines, I would try and see like, how do celebrity moms do it? And then I would just cry in a puddle on the ground because I like couldn't get it together. I'm like, oh, she's got 6-pack abs with a 2-month-old baby and I'm still in the jeans that I was wearing, you know, at 9 months. So comparison is the death of joy. And not only does it kill your joy, it kills your motivation, it kills your energy or your desire to move forward. It makes you more insecure. And so I'm like, put your head down. It's like a math test in 8th grade. Keep your eyes on your own paper. Like, focus here. Stop looking at what everyone else is doing. Stop paying attention to her life and live your own.
Yes.
You start in this space. The only person you have to be better than is who you were yesterday.
So
that
good.
That's my why. That is what I am on earth. Like, what is my greatest value in the world is I want to be a better version of myself every day.
I love it.
Like, I might not always get there, but every day I'm striving. I want to be a better mom and wife and leader and teacher and writer and everything. It's like, man, whatever you're doing, do as unto the Lord. Like, every day I'm trying to be better. And so, like, it doesn't matter if I'm not as great as 50 million other people, as long as, like, am I better than I was yesterday? Yeah.
What cogent advice? You're special. Like this, you're special. What you're doing is special, and so good. Along those lines, let me ask you some things people wouldn't ask you.
Yeah.
Life's changed for you, right? And I think anytime people listen to this, maybe you step to a new level or a new space.
Yeah.
You talked about anxiety earlier. I know the answer to this, but I want you to answer it for them. But do you still find yourself with anxiety about the next level, the next space?
Oh, yeah.
Also, there's some pressure, I think, sometimes of, I've stepped out, I don't want to fall either. So speak to that. For those, there's different people at different levels, but there are people that's like, I've got to a new level, I got to a new promotion, or I have started a business. There's something new, and then that extra, I think anxiety can hit. Are you experiencing any of that, and what are you dealing with it? What's the solution?
I'll tell, like, this is such an incredible story and like a brag on who you are and your heart. But after the book surpassed everything. And I, for months after it came out, really struggled. It was very overwhelming for me. And if you can't tell, I'm a fixer. And I don't like to live in a state of any kind of suffering. So for months, I'm struggling and I can't get past it. And I read every book and I'm listening to I'm trying everything and I can't. And it was something you said on your podcast one day that really resonated with me, and it was like, it was the answer to prayer. After months of searching, you said something like with professional athletes that you had coached, that there comes a time in their lives and careers where the success surpasses the vision that they had for themselves. And they will unintentionally start to self-sabotage because they're so uncomfortable with where they are, and that was me. And I was like, holy crap. And it was as simple as, you were like, dream a bigger vision. You need a bigger vision. So that was such a gift. But navigating this has been a lot. And it does feel like, holy smokes, this is a lot of responsibility. And now I have worked my butt off to get here. But I also believe God gave me this platform.
Both are true.
And so that is a massive responsibility, and I want to do that well. So yeah, it's a lot to navigate.
And I want to acknowledge that you're the right person, and you were chosen to do this, and you are special. Like, your whole existence has prepared you for this moment. Like, I really believe that about you. And one of the other things I've told you is that I also want to help you. Like, I also think the other thing when you step into that new space is to dream that bigger vision, and also to seek out and surround yourself with people who are going to support you and believe in you and push you and hold you accountable. And don't be afraid to ask for their help. People like me, people like you, at the right time, we want to be there for you. I want to help you create this change, because you're pioneering, you're trailblazing. Like, in 5 years and in 10 years, there are going to be other they're not going to be another you, but they're going to be other women in this
Absolutely.
space creating a movement, making a difference. But you're really doing it right now, right? And I'm so proud of you. And people today are seeing why. Like you're just a reservoir of realness, but also like real depth, real information. This content you don't hear other places. You weren't born thinking negative things about yourself. Those were thoughts that were placed in you and given to you by an external source at some time in your life. It could even be our parents. Don't do that. Be quiet. Sit down. Be a good boy. Be a good girl. Maybe it was criticism you received as a little one that you may not even remember to this day. It could have been a school teacher. It could have been ridicule at school from other children. But when you were young in your formative years, these negative thoughts about yourself were planted in you by an external source. That's so powerful to understand, because these things you think you believe about yourself that have become really true to you, you don't even really believe. They were not your original thoughts. But the power of belief is so incredible in our lives. It's so insidious, because when we have a belief about something, even if it was given to us by somebody else, our mind goes to work on proving to us that this belief is true. A belief is almost like this table right here, just the top once we get it. And what our mind tries to do is it tries to build legs under the table to reinforce that belief. So if somebody told you you weren't enough, or you weren't smart enough, or pretty enough, or fast enough, or strong enough, or you don't come from the right place, or you're not in the right culture, the right race, the right religion, the right height, the right IQ as a young person, or you were put down, and these beliefs were given to you, what happens is your mind tries to prove beliefs true, so it finds references. So once you think it, your mind finds an example of your life where you weren't enough, another one where you weren't enough, you weren't smart enough, you weren't pretty enough, you weren't handsome enough, you weren't strong enough. And it finds these references, and it builds like a leg, and multiple legs under a table, and pretty soon you can't move it. And it's stuck in there as a firm belief. That's why we have to guard our beliefs so preciously, because our mind goes to work on finding these legs, these references, which are real experiences in our life, to prove to us that that belief is true. And so although you may believe it to be true about you, these doubts and negative thoughts you have, these were not your original thoughts. That's a powerful thing to understand, because you weren't born this way. You weren't born doubting. You were born perfect. You were born believing you were going to do something great. You were born happy. You were born believing you were going to do something special with your life. As a baby, I promise you, you had no negative self-talk. You had no negative self-doubt. These are external sources. It's so important to know, because those thoughts aren't really who you are. They're somebody else's thoughts they gave you because of how they felt about themselves. And so today we're going to talk about how to build self-confidence and how to eliminate self-doubt. So how do we build this self-confidence? The process of building self-confidence is actually very easy. Believe it or not. Self-confidence is self-trust. Self-confidence is building a reputation with yourself, that you keep your word to you, that you keep the promises you make to you. When I meet somebody who has a ton of self-confidence, I don't look at that as somebody with a big ego. There's a difference. Somebody with self-confidence has a reputation with themselves that I do the things I say I'm going to do. That's where self-confidence comes from. When I meet someone who's not self-confident, I know this is someone who has consistently made promises to themselves they've not kept. They've started a diet and done it for a while but not kept it. They've made a commitment and goals to go make a certain amount of money in business, and they started down the road but then they didn't deliver on it long term, to get up at a certain time in the morning and then they don't do it. And so they have a process and a habit in their life, more often than not, of not keeping the promises they don't make to other people. They don't keep the promises they make to themselves. And so the cool thing is, self-confidence is an internal game. You do not need external accolades, external admiration in order to build self-confidence. You don't need any of those external forces. It's all done internally. You control this. And you control this by beginning today to keep the promises you make to yourself. And you have to stack the deck in your favor. Stack the game so you win. It's not good enough just to keep the promises you make to yourself. You must acknowledge it when you do it to you, to give yourself credit, to create confidence momentum, is what I call it. So whether that's setting the deck where you're going to get up a little bit earlier, you're going to make a certain amount of phone calls you miss, a certain amount of appointments, you're going to eat a certain amount of calories in your fitness, you're going to spend a certain amount of time with your children or your parents, and you begin to do these things you say you're going to do. You say simple things like, I'm going to lay out my clothes the night before I go to bed every night, before I go to sleep, so when I wake up that decision's made for me. And believe it or not, the fact that you just do something that simple, that you then deliver on begins to build confidence. So you say, I'm going to stretch in the morning when I get up, and you do it. All of a sudden, I'm not going to check my phone for 30 minutes. All these habits I teach, when you just begin to do the things you tell yourself you're going to do, you begin to build self-confidence, which is this reputation with yourself. So ask yourself a question right now. What is one thing right now, one promise I can make to myself that I'm going to begin to keep starting this minute and begin to do it? It could be how often I'm going to pick up a book and read it. But you begin to stack things you commit to do, and then you deliver on them and you acknowledge them to yourself. You're in the process of building self-confidence. Why is that so important? Of all the athletes I coach, when my athletes are performing at their peak level, they're at their highest self-confidence level. In fact, I love when I watch some of the athletes I coach get interviewed, and they kind of do this aw shucks, humble routine in their post-game interviews. Yeah, you know, just part of the team, you know, I got a lie, could have done a lot better today. But inside, I know these people are incredibly self-confident people. Any of you athletes listening to this, you know this. The great athletes you know have incredible amounts of self-confidence. You have to believe in you when it's a battle, when you're a hitter against a pitcher, or when you're a quarterback against a defense, or you're a defenseman in the NHL against their best offensive player, or you're a golfer and you have to make a 9-foot putt to win a tournament, right? You better have self-confidence. In fact, the separator, more often than not at the highest level in sports, is not they're a better shooter or a better putter or throw the ball a little bit faster, because everybody throws hard in the major leagues nowadays, it seems, right? That separators their self-confidence. It's true in being a parent. It's true in being a business person. It's true in every area of our life. The separator at the top levels is self-confidence. So now you have that first thing that you're going to commit to, that you're going to deliver on. Now, what I would ask you to do, that now that you've done that, is if you really want to build self-confidence, can you begin to extend that list of 5, 8, and 10 things that you are going to begin to do, that you commit to you, that you're going to do every single day to begin to stock that self-confidence? That's going to change it. Now let's go back to the self-doubt for a second. Self-doubt is the inverse of that. I don't trust me. I don't think I'm good enough. These are thoughts placed from the outside inside your mind. The minute you acknowledge that, that's not my thought, that's someone else's. That's not, you begin to eliminate. I call it like scratching the CD. When I begin to have negative self-talk, negative thoughts, I literally picture, and I'm old by the way, but I picture an old record player or a DVD, and I just scratch it. I scratch it. That thought gets scratched. I'm not good enough. I'm not smart enough. I'm not good looking enough. I'm not fast enough, strong enough. I'm not prepared enough. Once they enter, that's not my thought. That's something someone gave me when I was a kid, and I scratch it. And I literally say to myself, scratch it, scratch it, scratch it. And over time, it's like a DVD or a CD or a record player. Over time, that thought can't be played again in your recorder when you scratch it enough times. So I literally picture scratching and I say scratch it. I experience self-doubt, I experience negative thoughts, and I scratch them. I scratch them. I scratch them. And over time, it almost becomes funny. It's that thought's impact on me starts to be minimized over time. Every time I scratch it, I picture scratching it like a DVD or a record or a CD, and I say it to myself, scratch it, scratch it, scratch it. And what it does is it acknowledges the thought. It loses its power over me. The first time it still got some impact on me. The second time it might, but the fourth, fifth, seventh time, all of a sudden that thought just doesn't have the impact on me anymore, because I acknowledge it's not mine. I've scratched it, and over time my mind just doesn't want to play that song anymore. Doesn't want to play that movie anymore. And so that's how I begin to eliminate those thoughts in my mind. I build up my self-confidence and I scratch my self-doubt. There's also this misconception from people that you are certain things, meaning some people have this misconception that I am what I possess. In other words, I am my possessions. And so they link their self-confidence to their possessions. And so they're constantly trying to acquire more and more possessions, thinking that's where they get their self-confidence from. That's how they're defined as a person. I am my possessions. Couldn't be further from the truth. It's a hollow way to try to gain self-confidence by possessing things. Nothing wrong with going for material possessions. I have all kinds of them. But I don't link my confidence to those possessions, nor am I deluded into thinking if I could just possess more things, then I'll feel better about myself. So this is a mistake. There's a flawed thought. Number one flawed thought, I am my possessions. Second flawed thought, I am my accomplishments. In other words, my self-confidence is only linked to what I accomplish. So because I haven't accomplished certain things, I don't have that certain title, that certain award, that certain recognition, I don't believe in myself. I'm riddled with self-doubt. I'm defined by my accomplishments. The difficult thing about that is now all your life you're going to have to accomplish more and more and more in order to feel self-confident and eliminate self-doubt. You are not your accomplishments. You are not your possessions. You are you. You are perfect. You are beautiful. You were born to do something great with your life. If you're a person of faith like me, you believe God made you in His image and likeness and wants you to do something great with your life, not that you are your possessions, not that you are your accomplishments. And this is the social media insidious influence it has in our lives. People think, I don't feel good about myself. I've got this self-doubt. The gateway to me feeling more self-confidence is if I could possess more things or if I could accomplish more things. Yes, having nice things will make you feel better about yourself. Yes, accomplishing things certainly is a reinforcement for self-confidence, but it's not the pathway to getting it. The pathway to getting it is doing something great with your life where you keep the promises you make to yourself and acknowledge this self-doubt, this self-thought, this negative talk isn't even mine. It was given to me when it was impossible for me to defend myself as a child. And maybe it even happened in adolescence, and probably some of those incidences have happened for you as an adult. And these ones as an adult are like that thing I said earlier. Oh, it's another time I reinforced the table. I'm not good enough. I'm not smart enough. I'm not prepared enough. I'm not the right race. I'm not the right gender. I don't come from the right kind of family. I don't have the right education. And we find these references as adults to reinforce these self-doubting beliefs we were given by somebody else as a child. Flawed belief is that you are your possessions. You are your accomplishments. Third flawed belief. I am what other people say I am. Wrong. You are not what other people say you are, good or bad. I see too many people that if someone says something negative about them, they believe that's who they are. This is the flawed third belief. I am my possessions, I am my accomplishments, and you know what? Or I am what other people say I am. Let me be clear with you. You are not what other people tell you you are. It wasn't true when you were 18 months old, 5 years old, or 55 years old. You are not what other people say you are. So stop letting that dictate your self-confidence or fill you with self-doubt. And for the record, you are also not the good things people tell you you are all the time. Don't live for likes. Don't live for comments on your social media. Don't do things in your life just to solicit someone saying something great about you. It's a cheap, shallow, hollow way to try to gain self-esteem and self-confidence. It's fleeting, it's short-term, and it's needy. In fact, the fact that it is a necessity for you to get liked, to get people to say good things, to get comments on your social media, or to do so in your presence indicates a lack of self-esteem and self-confidence, because we know self-confidence is an internal game where we keep the promises we make to ourselves. The fourth type of flawed thinking is I am what I look like. In other words, if I don't look a certain way, like what the magazine says I should, or social media says I should, if I don't look like these people, I shouldn't have self-confidence. And that's ridiculous. I can tell you straightforwardly, you're beautiful as you are. Especially the ladies listening to this or watching this. The world is constantly trying to get you to believe you're not enough. You don't look right. You should lose this weight. You should gain this. This should be smaller. That should be bigger. Whatever it might be. They're constantly messaging women, you're not enough. You're not enough. You're not enough. You are what you look like. And this is true for men as well. Let me tell you straightforwardly, you are not what you look like. You are your soul. You are your spirit. You are your gifts. You are the contributions you make. You are your intentions. You are perfect as you are. That doesn't mean we don't want to look better. Doesn't mean we don't want to get into shape. But we want to do that to feel better about ourselves, not for the accolades from other people. We want to do that to feel healthier and stronger and be the ultimate version of ourselves. But by no means does that mean you're not perfect as you are. By no means does it mean you are defined by what you look like. You are not defined by what you look like. You are defined by the content of your character, the way you treat other people, and the difference you make in the world. So the four flawed thoughts that I see most right now is, I am my possessions. No, you're not. I am my accomplishments. No, you're not. I am what other people tell me I am and say I am, good or bad. No, you are not. And fourth, you are not what you look like. These are flawed beliefs that lead right to self-doubt and away from self-confidence. So the things we need to do to change our self-confidence is A, keep the promises we make to ourselves, and B, very important, we must begin to give ourselves credit for those things when we deliver on them. I want you to remember this as well. There's a power to the way we use the two B's, our brain and our body. See, self-confidence can also be a state, a physical state. It's very difficult when you're moving your body, sitting up straight, breathing deeply, right? You're in that physical, strong state of being, right? Right after a workout, during a workout is when we feel our most confident because our body's at a peak state. One way to generate self-confidence is to move your body into a strong state of being. Move your body. Literally, movement creates confidence. If you think about some of the peak times of your life, whether that be the fun time you may be having with your partner physically, intimately, or laughter, or peak performance running, right? Or your great accomplishments. Yes, there's a commonality to the way our body is moving at that time. If you think about the times when you're the least confident, it's usually when you wake up in the morning, isn't it? It's the most down, the most fearful, the most anxiety, or before you go to bed at night. These are two times most people experience the most amount of self-doubt, is right before bed and right when they wake up. Isn't that interesting? One of the reasons is because of how we're moving. We're laying down, we're hunched over, our breathing is shallow, there's no physical movement whatsoever. This creates a state of self-doubt right before we sleep, right when we wake up. Or if you're just kind of depressed or sick, self-doubt starts to kick in, doesn't it, right? If you ever had an injury and you couldn't move like you'd like to, that stagnation of the body begins to create self-doubt and strips us of our self-confidence. So moving our body is a gateway to self-confidence. And then our brain as well. We have to take control of our thoughts. We have to scratch the negative ones when they come in and replace them with great ones. Now, I don't believe self-talk works all the time, but I believe saying, I am strong, I am good, I intend, I'm a good man, my intentions are pure, I'm a good person, I make a difference in the world, I'm kind, I'm gentle, I'm generous, I'm strong, I'm faithful. Beginning to repeat these thoughts to myself, and these words do generate self-confidence. I keep the promises I make to myself. I'm a man of my word. Begin to talk to yourself and think these thoughts. When you combine your brain and your body, you scratch the self-doubt. You lose those four stupid beliefs. I am my accomplishments. I am my possessions. I am what other people say I am, or I am what I look like. These are completely flawed beliefs. We scratch those. We scratch them. We understand the process of stacking self-confidence in our life. We know we are the content of our character. And lastly, give yourself some credit. Will you please? And I'm going to tell you where to give yourself credit. And that is in the area of your intentions. A lot of my confidence comes from the fact that I keep the promises I make to myself. I know my self-doubt are thoughts that were given to me when I couldn't even defend myself as a young little boy. I know that I'm not my accomplishments. I know I'm not my possessions. I know I'm not what I look like. And I know I'm not what other people say I am. I understand the process of building self-confidence. I scratch the negative thoughts in my life. But I can tell you this, the last place I get my confidence from is my faith and my intentions.
You and I are both big believers that everything you need is within you now. And you started early in the interview by saying something amongst so many brilliant things, which is that if you'll get quiet and listen, you have the answer. And I think that was so beautiful, but I don't want to cheat the audience out of letting you answer because I asked you two questions back to back there. This taught me what about life, would you say?
Taught me so much. I think it taught me that your life, it really is about your choices. That we have more power than we know and more choices, and that it really is about your health and your fulfillment and your happiness and the love you have with your people, whoever your people are. That's the only thing that matters in that last moment, right? So I kind of had that moment, right? Where you're like, oops, what's going to happen? Am I going to be okay? Am I not going to be okay? Well, guess the only thing that mattered is the fact that I had Kevin and that he loved me and that I loved him and my parents and my dogs and all of that. I've had some friends who were having some rocky times in their relationships, and it's so easy to be tempted and say, oh, I'm just going to go have fun with all these new people and yeah, we're going to get divorced and that's it. I'm like, okay, but guess what? When you're sick, she's your ride or die. She's going to take care of you. This other person, yeah, you can go have fun. that's going to be it. And so I've actually mended a few relationships because of this knowledge. And it's true, like that's all you have in the end is your relationships and your health and your love. And yeah, I mean,
I've
there's
had
so many
friends. I've had friends. I want to ask you this because it seems like it didn't happen with you. And I know we're going deep, guys. I know today's been heavy, but I want to give you the gift of this woman. You know, I feel like for some reason your story's more relevant right now, Maria, than it's ever been. With all of, I think a lot of people think they're going through a crisis in their life right now, and perhaps there's some perspective given here as well, also tools. But I've had friends. We've all had this, everybody. We've had an experience. We've watched a movie and it makes us think something different about the way we're going to be around our children or our parents. And it lasts for 3 days and then we're back to where we were before. Or we've had a business setback or a relationship breakup and we promise ourselves, if I have another chance at a relationship, I'm going to do it this way next time. And then we don't. And we go back into our old patterns. Patterns are incredibly powerful things in our life, as you and I both know an awful lot about. But it's been a few years now for you. It seems to me that this had a real impact on you. Is it because you regularly remind yourself of the incident? Is it because I want people to create lasting change in their life? And even today, listening to you, a lot of people right now are reflecting on their perspective, on their coping skills, on what really matters, on reducing their stress levels, on their nutrition, on the people they love, on all of these things, on laughing more and smiling through the shot, right? And all of those things. But this change seems to have been, I don't want to call it permanent, but it's been long lasting for you, and I hope it to be permanent. How have you done that? Was it just a massive pattern interrupt, this one incident? Or is there something else you've done that you just don't allow yourself to lose that moment?
Yeah, I think I was going against my grain for a really long time unknowingly. And once you're in that kind of rat race, right, you're in it. And so for me, when I got out of it, I was like, okay, this is a rebirth. I am making major changes to my life. And I want them to stick. And so I almost like, when like yogis have to practice, like they have to give up their material possessions. I wanted to give everything up. I was trying to sell everything. I was trying to go real extreme. And my husband was like, no. But I knew that to hold on to it, I was going to have to really protect it carefully. And whenever I would go out and do any public speaking, people would come up to me and say, like, I had this too. And then I went back to my old ways.
Yes.
And anytime someone said that to me, that was just another reminder. And so I also have the gift of still having a brain tumor. And that is my constant reminder of leading a calm life, choosing the people I want to work with, choosing the people I want to be around. And all of the weekly lessons on my show keep me grounded in that space too. And so I really held on to it because I needed it. I was suffering so much before and didn't know how to get out of it. This was my get out of jail free card. Yeah. I was stuck in a dream that wasn't my dream anymore. Wow. So, a lot of us start off in life and we have a dream and then we accomplish it and then we kind of get stuck there because then we're accomplishing and it's easy and it's easy and it's easy and it's easy. But then you're just doing what's easy and no challenge, no growth comes, right? And then imagine if you're in toxic situations where people don't want you to grow on top of it and they're holding you down or whatever. And so for me, I was stuck in a dream that wasn't my dream anymore. And I needed to reinvent and I needed to change my whole life. And for me, this new chapter has been about all of that kind of spiritual and emotional growth. And I will say, and I say all the time, if I hadn't been doing the work with Tony and those seminars, I wouldn't have been prepared for this moment because I had those tools in my belt. I had the life is happening for me, not to me. I was able to eventually apply it to my mom too, and then realize that the gifts from my mom are what I'm learning that I can impart on people. So she's like almost like my guinea pig, right? Like I'm experimenting on her and being like, wow, that works. We can apply this over here to all these people. When I look back at when I was little, I always wanted to help people. I love solutions. And I look at my books, everything I've written, everything I've done is always about helping people. My network, AfterBuzz TV, it's about helping people. And so I love helping people. So I'm able to apply those things from my mom over to everybody else. And it fills me. And so I knew that I had to hold on to it really tightly. And do I falter sometimes now? Like, I'm going through a challenging time and I have to keep relying on my tools, and I have to keep remembering you can't allow these situations that aren't real to take your health. And it can be challenging in moments, but I bounce back really fast because of all of it now.
Everyone doesn't know this. This is a guy who's working at IBM. Most people probably did not know that Jeff Foxworthy worked at IBM, right? That's what he was doing for a living. I think your dad worked there too, if I'm not mistaken.
That's how I got the job. I had flunked out of college. I was working at a grocery store, and I think my dad said to one of his buddies, "Hey, give my kid a job." And so it sounds more glamorous. I was carrying a tool bag and fixing machines. But it wasn't singing to me. I knew while I was doing it, I'm like, crap, this isn't my parking space. This isn't my lane. And I worked with a bunch of guys that would always went to the local comedy club in Atlanta, and they go, "Dude, you're funnier than those people at the comedy club. You should go up down there." And I'm like, "Yeah, I don't know." And so they entered me without my knowledge. They entered me in a contest, not an amateur night, a contest for comedians, for working comedians, called the Great Southeastern Laugh Off. And they came back and they said, "We entered you in this contest." I'm like, "Oh crap." So I went and wrote like 5 or 6 minutes of material about my family. And I went down, and the first night on stage, I was so nervous. I won the contest. A minute and a half into it, and I was like, this is what I want to do. This is what I was made to do. This is my gift. And then I came off, and this girl came over to talk to me, and I was so nervous I spilled my drink down the front of her sweater. And I made a joke. I said, "Well, I guess you're never going to go out with me." And she said, "Well, you didn't even ask me." And that girl I've been married to for 37 years.
That's amazing.
So I met my wife and my career less than 5 minutes apart.
Unbelievable.
Same place, some night.
And by the way, everyone, there's a lesson in that, which is he went and did something he was terrified to do. And sometimes on the other side of things we're super afraid of, that we feel ill prepared for, is our dream. And that's not hokey or corny. Maybe it's even occurring to you right now, listening to me say it, right? Like, how'd this both happen that night? If you don't go do something you're totally terrified to do, not completely prepared for, you don't get your career, which is your dream, the platform to influence people like you're doing right now, nor potentially this amazing thing you're most proud of, which is your family. And it was because you did something you were freaking not ready to do and afraid to do. And on the other side of that was this gift, right?
It's the consequence of saying yes. It's just going, yeah, okay, I'll do it. Yeah. It doesn't mean you're not scared, but that's all bravery is being scared and doing it anyway.
Yeah.
So, and I got over being scared to go on stage, but yeah, it's the consequence of, that was how it happened for me at the mission. Is the guy looked at me and goes, "Man, these guys have never been in a small group of men, like to done a small group Bible study. Would you lead it?" And I certainly wasn't the most qualified guy to do it, but I went, "Yeah, okay, I'll do it."
Yeah.
There's 5 million people more qualified than me, but I'll do it. Yeah. And it was the consequence of saying yes that it ended up being one of the most impactful things in my life. Yeah. And I tell my kids, Ed, I said, "You know what I want you to do in life? I want you to fail. I want you to fail a lot. Because if you're failing, you're pushing the boundaries. You're trying to find the boundaries of what you're capable of doing. If you never fail, you've never pushed that boundary and gone too far over it to win. That's not my thing." So really fail a lot, man, because then you're pushing it.
I love that. And God doesn't call the qualified. He qualifies the called. We all probably heard that saying, but it's true. I've experienced it in my own life. All these things I wasn't ready to do or prepared for. But and people say, "Well, how do you step into that space?" For me, I must just say this to everybody. I know it's true for you too. My business partner is God. My business partner is Jesus. So for me, I got a good partner who's got my back all the time. Yeah. So I step into these things with some measure of faith, not really in myself, but in who's got my back and who my partner is. And that if I'll step boldly in faith, some of these answers and thoughts and the words and the whatevers, the people, the places, the relationships sort of appear because I've stepped in faith. When you don't step in faith, I think oftentimes those people, the thoughts, the circumstances, the meetings, the connections don't show up because you've not stepped into that uncomfortable, unknown place. That's just how I look at it.
I think you're right. And you know, you've got like this light, and you're like a porch light where like moths are attracted to it. And so yeah, you know, it sounds kind of corny, but we live in a world now where people, they want the likes. They want it's give me the likes, give me the likes. It's almost important to get to the point where you go, I don't care. I don't care. This is what I do. You know, I know, like, within what I do, I would I'm not mean-spirited about it. If I hurt your feelings with anything I've ever said, please forgive me. I'm sorry. That was not the intent. So if you don't like me as a I don't care. I don't care. I mean, I hope you find somebody that you like, because laughter is really important. You know, it's kind of like the release valve that keeps the boiler from exploding.
Yeah.
But
how do you feel about, though, Jeff? Like lately, like you know, obviously the other night when we're recording this, we'll be out pretty soon. But this situation happened with Will Smith and Chris Rock, where Chris Rock's making jokes, right? And you've had this situation. This goes to your special. It's called The Good Old Days, and he just reflects on some of the things that are funny, that are just also beautiful, and sometimes better or just different than they are now. But then, you know, you've seen whether you agree with the messaging or not, but, you know, Kevin Hart's had the cancel culture, Chappelle's had major issues, and those are just a few. But how do you feel about, because comedy is art, right? And so what are your thoughts on this? Like, that's not funny to me, so you're a bad dude type stuff.
It's we have a real hard time as a society of laughing at ourselves now. And within that lies the problem, because we have to give up our need to be right. When you have to be right, then the other has to be wrong. And people don't want to engage in any kind of relationship where they have to be wrong all the time. And so they just go the other way. And as a comic, it's kind of our job to just hold things up and go, why do we do this? Why do we do that? We're truth tellers. Why do we do this? Why do we do this? And when people start attacking that and they don't have the ability to laugh at themselves, it means they think that they've got it all figured out. And none of us have it all figured out. You've got your lane, and you've got a lot of that figured out, and I got my lane, and I got a lot of that figured out, but there's a lot of other lanes I know nothing about. And so every day you and I are both coming to 100 forks in the road, and we're having to go, do I go this way or that way? And we're all doing the best we can, but I don't have to be right. There were things that I argued vehemently for when I was 20 that at 60 I go, nah, I've kind of changed my mind on that one.
Me too.
So
totally agree with you. I got to tell you something. It's interesting that people ask me, the older you get, you know, what have you learned? I said, honestly, one of the things I have learned is how little I know. I thought I knew a lot more at 30 than I know I don't know now at 50. And I'm always concerned when I have a friend who never changes their mind, right? Mine should change, more information. We should evolve, we should mature, right? It always concerns me when someone never changes their mind, never says, I'm sorry. Oops, I made a mistake.
What that tells me is you haven't researched it at all, or you haven't engaged in conversation on it, you know. Because I've changed my mind about a million things. And if I had any advice, I was telling my youngest daughter this the other day, and I love this child so much, but you know, when she's not the child I want to be with when I have my heart attack, you know, it's my oldest one who's very common there. But I told her, I said, you want to know what? I said, baby girl, the biggest thing that I've learned in life, the most helpful thing that I've learned in life is this. And like I said, I'm visual. I go, let it go.
Let it go.
And I literally, I mean, I know you guys are listening to me, but I'm opening my hand and I go, let it go. I used to be the guy when I was 20 and somebody cut me off in traffic, I'd be on his bumper and I'd be changing lanes, you know, yelling at him and screaming. And now it happens and I go, let it go. Let it go.
Why do you think we don't? You think we're control? We think we control everything? You think that's what it is?
Yes. Yeah. And something like COVID shows you, you don't have control over anything. You don't have control over where you get this little invisible virus that may or may not kill you. You don't have any control over what's going on in Ukraine right now. You don't have any control over what's going on, sadly, in the houses of Congress right now. And you have very little control over things, but that doesn't mean it's hopeless. It's the one who spoke the universe into existence has control. And if you will rightly take your place in this and go, hey, I don't have control, but I trust you and you do. So, and you've given me these gifts. So let me quit wasting time being pissed off at dad, or let me quit wasting time yelling at the guy in traffic. And let me use these gifts and these things, you know, everything. If you look around, I'm looking at your office here behind you. You got a poster on the wall. It was created for a purpose, to promote this book. This chair I'm sitting in was created for a purpose, so somebody didn't have to stand up. So if you do believe in a creator, and these things, these simple things were created with a purpose, then what about you and me? And it's not my purpose. God, what a waste of time. What a waste of my lap if I'm going to be yelling at somebody in traffic, or sitting home wrenching my hands over what's going on in, you know, what's going on in places I don't have any control over. Let me deal with what I have control over. I have control over being a good dad. I have control over being a good husband. I have control over being a good steward of this gift that I've been given. I don't have any control over what somebody thinks about me. So I'm letting that go. You know, and I love it, but I'm letting it go.